Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto awakens a Zanpakuto in the Chunin exams part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Konoha outskirts, approaching midnight. In a particularly lonely stretch of woods surrounding the village of Kanehagir no Sato, village hidden by the leaves, we find a young man, apparently no older than 15, sitting on the ground in front of an unrolled scroll. He is slightly short for his age, standing at about 5 feet 5 inches in height, with bright, golden blonde hair that popped up in a bed of spikes, deep cerulean blue eyes, and a trio of whisker-like markings on each cheek. He was dressed in a bright orange jumpsuit that practically screamed, "I'm over here, kill me now." This young man is none other than Naruto Uzumaki, master prankster and pariah of the Hidden Leaf Village, not to mention the hero of our story. Sitting in front of our young blonde is a massive scroll, opened slightly so he could read its contents. This was the Forbidden Scroll, an artifact of the Hidden Leaf containing some of the village's most dangerous jutsu. Jutsu that were forbidden from use for either the toll they take upon their wielder or the effects they cause. The blonde seemed to be studying the scroll intently when a new voice broke the silence of the forest. "Found you." Pausing from his reading, Naruto looked up to find an older man, probably in his mid-20s. He had dark brown hair worn up in a spiky ponytail in the back and a large scar stretching across the bridge of his nose. He was also dressed the standard attire for a Chunin of the Leaf, with the only exception being a set of bandages wrapped around several of his joints. This was Irika Yumino, Naruto's teacher at the Shinobi Academy. "Hehe, you found me quicker than I thought, Irika-sensei. I only had enough time to learn a single jutsu from the scroll, but that's still enough to pass, right?" stated the grinning blonde as he stood up while he rubbed the back of his head. "Pass? What are you talking about, Naruto?" asked the dark-haired instructor as he appraised his student, noting the sweat and other stains and scuffs covering the majority of the blonde's clothing along with the heavy perspiration covering his forehead. "He's covered in sweat, he must have been training here the entire time," surmised Irika as he studied his student's appearance. "Come on, Irika-sensei, don't play dumb. I was told that if I was able to steal this scroll and learn a jutsu from it before I got caught, I'd automatically graduate," answered Naruto with a broad smirk across his features, evidently pleased with his accomplishments. "Is that it? Did someone trick Naruto into stealing the scroll for them?" questioned Irika inwardly while he physically asked, "Who told you that?" "Mizuki-sensei," stated the blonde while he cocked his head to the side, looking slightly confused. Just then a slight whistling sound filled the air and Naruto found himself knocked sideways by a tackle from Irika. Before the blonde could make his annoyance at the sudden attack known, he noticed the tree he was standing in front of mere seconds ago was now riddled with kunai and shuriken. He also saw that Irika-sensei was covered in a number of cuts with several of the pointy weapons piercing his back and side. "Damn it, I missed," stated a snide voice from overhead. Looking up, Naruto saw another man the same age as Irika with a face framed by long, dull gray hair, the face of his second instructor Mizuki. Turning a now grinning face to Naruto, he said happily, "Congratulations, Naruto, you passed, now hand over the scroll." "Naruto, don't!" shouted Irika as he tried to rise up from his knees. "Mizuki tricked you. That scroll contains some of the village's most dangerous and forbidden jutsu. You can't let him take it." Mizuki scowled at Irika for a moment before a twisted idea sprung up in his evil little mind. "Naruto," stated Mizuki kindly, "would you like to know a secret?" "What kind of secret?" asked the now thoroughly confused Naruto. What the hell was going on? "Mizuki, don't, it's forbidden!" shouted Irika, understanding what Mizuki was planning. "The secret behind why everyone hates and ignores you. The reason they insult, degrade, and belittle you at every turn. The reason you will never be accepted in this village," stated Mizuki with a twisted grin. Noting he had the blonde's complete attention, he began to secretly unsheath one of the giant shuriken from across his back, keeping the movements slow and hidden. "You remember the story about how the Kyubi no Yoko, nine-tailed demon fox, attacked 15 years ago and was killed by the fourth?" Not even waiting for a response, Mizuki continued, "Well, that was a lie. The fourth couldn't kill the demon, so he imprisoned it inside a newborn infant." "Stop it!" shouted Irika. "That infant was you. You are the nine-tailed fox. Now die, demon brat!" shouted Mizuki as he let his giant shuriken fly at the boy. Naruto didn't even notice the weapon flying straight at him. His mind was filled with thoughts of confusion and betrayal. "I'm the fox? That can't be. I'm me, aren't I? But that's why everyone hates me. What about Gramps, and the Ikarakas, and Irika-sensei? Do they hate me as well? Were they just pretending to be kind to me? Maybe it would be better if I just died now," thought the devastated blonde as he closed his eyes and waited for the shuriken to come and end his life. Chuck. The sound metal-piercing flesh echoed in the blonde's ears, but he felt no pain. Slowly opening his eyes, the blonde found Irika standing in front of him, the shuriken piercing his back. Naruto couldn't understand it. Why? He croaked, tears filling those cerulean blue eyes. Why did you save me? Arna the fox, the demon that caused everyone so much pain? He cried out, the tears slowly starting to leak from his eyes. Irika smiled down gently at his student and placed a shaky hand on the blonde's shoulder. You're wrong, Naruto, you aren't the demon fox. You are by far the strongest, most kind-hearted boy I have ever met. You train yourself with all your might, even if you make a mistake or screw up at times, but you never give up. You are just like I was, stated the Chunin proudly, his voice soft but undeniably sure. Don't lie to him, or yourself, Irika, sneered out Mizuki, reminding both of his presence. You hate the fox just as much as I or anyone else does, maybe more. After all, he's the one who killed your parents. You're right, stated Irika as he turned around to face Mizuki, and Naruto felt his heart shatter again. I hate the fox, but I don't hate Naruto, stated the injured Chunin with conviction. He isn't the fox, he's Naruto Uzumaki, citizen of Konohagure, my favorite student, and someone I'm willing to fight to protect. He proclaimed to the traitor while taking a step forward, only to collapse to his knees as his injuries and blood loss began to take effect. How sickeningly sweet, spat Mizuki, disgust evident in his tone. I was going to wait until after I finished off the brat to kill you, but for that sickening little show I'll let you go first so you don't have to see your favorite student die. With those sneered words, the gray-haired traitor removed his second giant shuriken and charged at the injured instructor, blades spinning rapidly, ready to end his target's life. Wham! Only to be stopped halfway by the foot of the forgotten blonde slamming directly into his nose, breaking it, and sending the traitorous instructor flying backward. Listen, Mizuki team, and listen well. If you ever try to lay a hand on my sensei again, I'll fucking kill you! Snarled the enraged blonde, his eyes narrowed into slits as he glared murderously at the Chunin. Like you could, demon brat, spat Mizuki as he recovered from the impact, wiping his bleeding nose with the back of his sleeve. We both know you're still exhausted from training with that damn scroll all night, so there's nothing you can do to stop me. He finished with a sneer as he charged forward once again, this time intending to end the blonde. He's right, thought the blonde, falling into a defensive stance as he got ready to defend himself and his precious person. I used every drop of my chakra mastering that Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, shadow clone technique, from the Forbidden Scroll. If only I had a little while to recover, then I could use it again. But that won't stop me. I don't care if it kills me, I will do whatever it takes to protect the people I care about. I refuse to lose, mentally roared out the blonde, desperation and conviction resounding equally in that final, silent proclamation. And with it something amazing happened. A nimbus of pure white light suddenly flared to life around the blonde, surrounding him in a blinding aura pure white. Mizuki instinctively stopped his advance, and jumped back as the light filled the forest surrounding them. What the hell? Is this some kind of trick? Did that demon have enough strength left to try something? Thought the confused Chunin. Irika, who'd managed to push himself up against a nearby tree, simply stared at his student in awe. What is going on? He softly asked the world. Naruto was just as confused as the light flared around him. The blonde stared on in awe, not even blinking as the nimbus of light slowly congealed into a new shape right in front of his eyes. In just a few seconds, and a second, smaller flare of light, the nimbus had changed. Floating just inches in front of the blonde's face was a katana with a jet black sheath and hilt, and a golden handguard shaped like a spiral. As Naruto stared in awe at the blade floating just inches in front of his nose, he heard a soft voice echo in his mind. Time seemed to slow to a halt as the voice echoed in his mind, and the colors of the surrounding forest faded into shades of gray. Do you truly wish to be strong enough to protect them? Whispered the voice, sounding as if it was coming from a great distance away. Despite the softness of the sound, the voice itself was strong, firm, and undeniably feminine. Yes, stated the blonde, slightly confused and unsure, wondering what the hell was happening. Even if it means sacrificing your own happiness? Asked the voice again, this time slightly louder and clearer, as if the speaker was drawing closer to him. Yes, growled out the blonde, doubts flowing out of him as new energy seemed to surge through his veins. Even if it doing so puts your life, your very soul on the line? Asked the voice again, even louder and closer than before. Yes, howled out the blonde, not a single doubt in his mind, body, or soul. Then draw the sword and call out to me, stated the voice excitedly, now sounding as if the speaker was right behind him, whispering in his ear, as the blonde felt a presence momentarily appear behind his back. My name is... Naruto's hands instantly reached out, breaking whatever enchantment that had frozen the world around him, grabbing the hilt and scabbard of the katana in front of him in a single instant. Drawing the sword, he held it out, blade pointing in front of him, while shouting, "Sakabitasu, Beneheim! Cry out, Crimson Princess!" Instantly the katana was again enveloped in a bright light, only this time the light was a bright crimson red instead of a piercing white. After a brief moment the light began to fade away, dispersing like mist or smoke in the surrounding air, revealing the blade's new form. Resting in the blonde's hand was a sleek, medium-sized sword. It had a crimson tassel dangling on the end of the hilt, which had a gentle decorative bend just before the end. Instead of a cross guard, a U-shaped decoration covered the first 3 or 4 inches of blade, and a red decorative string wrapped thrice around where the blade met hilt, with a 3-loop bow on one side and a folded paper decoration on the other. The metal handguard had a flower petal design right as it meets the string crossguard. The blade itself was straight and slim, though somewhat short, with a single edge along the bottom and a rounded top, and ended in a slanted razor-like edge instead of tapering to a point. As he watched the blade transform in front of his eyes, Naruto felt knowledge fill his mind. Knowledge of his blade's new abilities and how to activate them. Knowledge of how to wield the weapon now resting in his hand. He also felt new energy filling him like he was drawing in chakra by the bucket load. As the knowledge settled in and the blade's transformation ended, he whispered a single word that best described the moment. Sugt. Mizuki was no coward. Granted, he was a deceitful, conniving, little snake of a man, but a coward he was not. Once he got over the shock of a weapon suddenly appearing out of thin air and transforming into an entirely new weapon right in front of his eyes, his trademark sneer came back. Whatever trick the brat was trying to pull, it wouldn't be enough to save him. Confidence restored, the traitorous Chunin snarled at the blonde. "I don't know what demonic tricks that little toy of yours has, fox brat, but I'm not going to get close enough to find out," proclaimed the traitor as he went through a set of hand signs, Katan, Enryu, fire release, stream of flames. Bellowed the Chunin as he breathed out a wide stream of flames at the injured instructor and the young blonde standing defensively in front of him. Naruto didn't even flinch as he stood in front of his teacher, lifting his sword to meet the oncoming rush of flames. "Chikasumi no Tate, Beneheim. Crimson Mist Shield, Crimson Princess," proclaimed the blonde quietly. A thick stream of bright crimson, mist-like energy suddenly bloomed outward from the tip of the blonde's new sword. The mist quickly gathered into a roughly hexagonal-shaped barrier that met the rushing fire attack with an audible slam. Mizuki stopped his attack after a minute and looked forward to seeing only the burnt remnants of both Irika and Naruto. Granted, he'd probably just destroyed the scroll, but he could still claim that Naruto had killed Irika, and he'd been forced to kill the blonde in order to protect himself and try to reclaim the scroll. That would make him an instant hero of the leaf, maybe even finally get him promoted to Jounin and named as the next Hokage. Wouldn't that be a laugh and the perfect way to mock that damn brat from beyond the grave? His delusions of grandeur suddenly fell to pieces as the last smoking remnants of his attack cleared, showing Naruto and Irika free of any harm, the crimson shield not even cracked, and leaving only a bit of scorched grass and a good amount of smoke lingering in the air as the only proof that the attack had ever occurred. Mizuki stood stunned at how easily his attack had been deflected. "I think I used too much chakra in the shield, Irika-sensei," commented the blonde offhandedly, a smirk evident on his features. "It was way stronger than needed to block that puny attack. I guess I really need to work on my control," he added disappointedly before shrugging. "Anyway, now it's my turn to attack, so you better be ready, Mizuki team," he finished with a feral grin. Bringing his sword to the side, he shouted out, "Nake, Beneheim, sing, Crimson Princess," while swinging his sword forward in a wide slash. Flowing from the tip as he swung, a long streamer of dark crimson energy gathered in front of him, forming an arch of red. The moment the swing ended, 3 points on the arch sprung forward, forming a trio of crimson spears that flew through the air directly at the traitorous Chunin, who jumped quickly in an attempt to dodge the oncoming attack. Mizuki was barely able to leap over the first 2 spears, but the third caught him in the lower half of his leg. The spear-like energy blast ripped through the side of Mizuki's left leg, nearly cutting halfway through the limb. The traitorous instructor's balance was destroyed from the sudden loss of one of strength in one of his legs, and he fell as his leg collapsed beneath him. Before he had time to recover, Naruto was almost on top of him, the tip of his sword pointed directly at Mizuki's chest. "Shibari, Beneheim binding, Crimson Princess." Suddenly a small stream of dark crimson energy sprang from the blade's tip and flew toward the Mizuki. As the band of crimson energy flew forward, it expanded, forming a wide interlocking net of crimson energy. The energy net slammed into Mizuki's chest and pushed the traitorous Chunin backward, slamming him hard into the side of a nearby tree before the net wrapped around the tree, binding the traitor to it. The impact from his skull hitting the tree also knocked Mizuki into unconsciousness. Naruto slowly walked back toward Irika, who was now sitting, staring in wide-eyed surprise as he watched his student take out a full-grown Chunin. As the young Chunin instructor watched, Naruto picked up the jet black sheath, which he dropped after unsheathing his sword, from the ground and slowly sheathed his new sword. As the blade's tip touched the opening of the sheath, a small glow of crimson energy seemed to come off the blade before it reverted back to its plain, black katana form. Staring at his new blade for a moment, Naruto could only shake his head and let out a low whistle as he sheathed the weapon. Looking over to Iruka, he grinned at the older man before holding the sheathed weapon in front of him by the sheath and proclaiming happily, 3 words: Iruka-sensei, best sword ever. Iruka could only chuckle at his student's never-ending enthusiasm before he motioned for Naruto to come closer. When Naruto had come close enough and leaned down to face his teacher, he said, "Close your eyes, Naruto." Doing as instructed, the blonde closed his eyes. After a few moments he heard Iruka say, "Okay, Naruto, you can open your eyes now." Opening his eyes to look at his teacher, Naruto instantly noticed that his headband was gone. Placing a hand on his forehead, Naruto felt the cool feeling of the steel part of the hitate resting against his forehead. "Congratulations, Naruto," Iruka stated happily, "you graduate. To celebrate, I'll take you out for ramen. Well, after I get patched up in the hospital anyway," he finished with a laugh. Naruto stood stock still for a few moments in shock before he jumped up and shouted in joy before tackling Iruka, much to the older Chunin's pain and discomfort. Inside the Hokage's office, the third Hokage stood in front of his viewing glass, a small wistful smile etched on his aged features. After witnessing Naruto summon his Zanpakuto and defeat the traitor Mizuki in single combat, he couldn't argue with Iruka's decision to promote the boy. The old Hokage couldn't deny the feeling of pride and warmth in his old heart as he watched his adopted grandson, but he also couldn't deny the feelings of worry and nervousness for the boy. With Naruto's bloodline awakening, he couldn't keep at least part of the boy's heritage a secret any longer, and with that knowledge would come a number of enemies, both great and small. Sighing to himself, he quickly ordered his Anbu bodyguard to arrest Mizuki, get Iruka to the hospital, and bring Naruto to him. After all the other ninja in the room had left, the third looked out the window with a small smile on his face. "Kushina," he whispered happily as he stared out into the night sky, "your son is truly starting to grow into a fine young shinobi. I just hope he's ready to learn the truth, and the dangers that come with it. I can't help but wonder if he's inherited the other half of your bloodline as well?" A short time later, Naruto was in the Hokage's office, sitting in front of the old man's desk, sword resting in his lap, and his face running a gambit of emotions. On the other side of the desk, the Hokage sat in silence as well, his hands folded in front of his face, and his mind abuzz with worries. The old man had hoped that this day wouldn't come, at least not so soon, not until the boy was older and more capable of defending himself and dealing with the truth, but there was nothing he could do about that now. The boy had awakened his mother's bloodline, and now there was nothing that could stop it. The old man briefly thought about attempting to seal the boy's newly awakened bloodline, but quickly banished those thoughts. First, he doubted there was even a way to effectively seal off the blonde's bloodline, considering how heavily linked it was to both the sword now resting in the young man's lap and Naruto's own body and chakra network. Not to mention the fact that Naruto would probably see the act as a form of betrayal, and combined with everything else that had happened tonight, would likely abandon the village if he tried. He also briefly thought of simply keeping his silence about Naruto's family, but again that idea was shot down shortly after it was formed. Sarutobi knew for a fact how dangerous the blonde's new bloodlines could be, and without the information Kushina provided in that scroll, Naruto could seriously damage Konoha or himself by accident. Besides, Kushina had a number of friends who would be able to easily recognize her bloodline, and thus her connection to Naruto, and he doubted even his direct orders would silence them after keeping the blonde's heritage a secret for so long. No, the boy needed the information now, and despite his wishes to keep the boy's heritage secret until he was old enough to properly handle everything, there was no way to keep his mother's identity a secret any longer. The Hokage's train of thought was interrupted by the voice of the young blonde sitting in front of him. Shortly after Iruka had given him his headband, a group of Anbu had arrived on the scene. A number of them had quickly arrested Mizuki, one using the hilt of his sword to silence the ranting traitor who was trying to lie and pin the blame on Naruto after he was removed from the tree and returned to consciousness, while another, smaller group had performed some basic first aid on the injured Iruka before carrying the injured instructor to the hospital for full treatment. Before Naruto could follow, the remaining 2 members of the Anbu squad had stopped him and said that the Hokage needed to see him right away. Naruto had trusted the masked nin's words, mostly because the Anbu had, except for a few noticeable exceptions, always been pretty kind to the blonde, and Naruto was glad the pair that was in charge of escorting him now included one of his favorites, Nico. The purple-haired kunoichi wearing the distinctive cat mask had always been a dear friend to the blonde, having looked after him a number of times when he was younger, and the Hokage was too busy to keep an eye on him, but she seemed to be distracted tonight. Naruto also noticed that she seemed to be constantly glancing at the sword he was carrying, though he could be mistaken. It was really hard to tell with those masks they wore after all. Now the blonde was sitting in front of the man he viewed as a grandfather for most of his life, and the man who had also been lying to him for most of his life as well. The young blonde's mind was a chaotic storm of emotions as he sat there staring at the old man who seemed to be lost in thought as well. As the blonde sat there, his mind ran back to the countless times he'd come running into this very office as a child, crying to the elderly Kage after someone had said or did something especially cruel to him. How he'd always asked the older man why nearly all the grown-ups in the village hated him, and how the old Kage would never give him a straight answer. After a time the blonde had simply stopped asking, always assuming that the old Kage didn't know, but now the truth was out and he wasn't happy about it. As his thoughts continued to swirl, the blonde felt anger begin to boil in his chest. The old man had lied to him all his life, and now wasn't even bothering to apologize for it. Finally, anger and betrayal overriding his other emotions, the blonde decided to break the silence that seemed to eclipse the room. So Hokage-Gigi, the blonde practically hissed out the formerly warm suffix, causing the old fire shadow to flinch slightly. Were you ever going to tell me about my little tenant? The old man let out a heavy breath before turning his full attention to Naruto and beginning to speak. Naruto, he said slowly, taking his time to ensure his voice was as calm and placating as it could be. I know you're upset right now, but his speech was interrupted by the younger boy standing up and slamming one of his hands down on the table, while the other held his new sword so tightly that his knuckles were turning white. Upset? Upset. You're damned right I'm upset. You've known all along why nearly everyone in this village hated me and you never bothered to tell me, shouted the enraged blonde, practically leaping out of his chair to glare at the old man sitting behind the desk. Didn't you think I had the right to know? Didn't you think I deserved a reason for all the shit I had to endure from this village? Snarled the blonde, tears forming in his eyes as betrayal began to overwhelm rage. Naruto, please calm down, pleaded the elderly Kage, holding up his hands to the younger man. I didn't tell you because you weren't ready to learn the truth yet. I thought it would have been too dangerous, Sarutobi explained, trying to placate the blonde. Too dangerous? What the hell would have been dangerous about me knowing why I was treated like shit by the majority of the bastards in this village? Snarled the blonde in response, neither calm nor the least bit placated by the answer. I wanted you to have a normal childhood, Sarutobi answered. That's the reason I made it a law forbidding anyone from mentioning your relationship with the fox under penalty of death. A normal childhood? Growled the blonde sarcastically, acid practically dripping off his voice as he slammed a fist into the desk in front of him as he barked out a short, sarcastic laugh. Ha! That's rich. Tell me, old man, is it normal for a kid to be constantly glared at and insulted for no reason? Is it normal to have nearly every shop in town overcharge or outright deny selling to you? Is it normal for parents to tell their children to avoid you for no reason? Does any of that sound like your idea of normal? Finished the blonde with an audible snarl. The Hokage visibly deflated at that little statement, and a pained look entered his old eyes. I know, Naruto, stated the old man, letting his head drop. I know I've failed you in nearly every way possible, but please believe me when I say that everything I did to try and help you. Finished the old Kage. Naruto was more than a little shocked at the way the old man was acting. Normally the old man was as strong and durable as an oak, but now the man seemed to be on the verge of tears himself. Hell, the man's last sentence sounded more like he was begging than anything. Here was Hiruzen Sarutobi, one of the greatest shinobi in the Leaf Village's history, nearly in tears over what had happened. It sort of made the blonde feel a bit guilty. He knew the old man was wrong for keeping everything a secret from him for so long, but a part of him also realized the old man was only doing what he thought was best, even if it all went disastrously wrong. Taking a few long deep breaths, the blonde sat back down. I believe you, Hokage-Gigi, stated the blonde calmly, but it's going to take me a while before I can forgive you for this, and a lot longer before I can trust you like I did before. Finished the blonde coldly, not meeting the older man's eye. Sarutobi merely nodded his head. I understand, Naruto, and I'll do anything in my power to try and earn back your trust, stated the old man resolutely. Deciding that it was now or never, the Hokage reached into a drawer and pulled out a scroll. Naruto, I was instructed to give you this scroll when you awakened your bloodline. Bloodline? Questioned the blonde as he took the offered scroll. Sarutobi nodded and indicated the sword that was still in Naruto's hand. That sword you're carrying is a physical manifestation of your chakra, a part of the bloodline you've inherited. Noticing the blonde was about to speak up again, the elder Sarutobi raised a hand and stated, please, just read the scroll before you ask me any more questions. If there's anything you want to know after you've finished reading, just ask me. I'll answer to the best of my abilities. Naruto gave the man a brief look before nodding his head. The blonde set his sword down against the side of his chair before attempting to open the scroll. After struggling for a few moments, the blonde noticed a seal near the exact center of the scroll where it was supposed to start unrolling from. The blonde briefly turned his attention to the Hokage while indicating the small dark red marking. "What's this seal for?" asked the blonde curiously. The old Kage leaned forward and studied the seal before answering. "That's called a blood seal, Naruto. It's a type of seal that can only be released when a bit of the proper blood is smeared across it." "Proper blood?" questioned the blonde. "Depending on the type of seal, it could be the blood of a specific person, a specific family line, a specific clan, or simply human or some kind of animal blood. Simply cut or bite your finger, and then smear the blood across the seal. That should release it and allow you to access the scroll's contents." Nodding his head again, the blonde bit his thumb hard enough to draw blood. It was pretty easy considering the blonde's pronounced canines, one of several of his physical characteristics he was now attributing to being the container for the fox. After swiping the blood that had formed on the already healed digit across the seal, the blonde watched as the blonde seemed to be absorbed into the seal before it dissolved into a small amount of fine red powder that fell to the floor, while the scroll seemed to unlock and began to unfold itself in the blonde's hands. Taking a deep breath as he unrolled more of the scroll, the blonde began to read. "To my little maelstrom. I guess the first thing I should do is introduce myself. To most of the Leaf Village I am known as Kushina Uzumaki, also known as the Benicio, Crimson Tide, but to you I'd like to be remembered by a different title, Ka-san. That's right, my Sochi, I'm your mother. I don't have a lot of time, I can feel my life slipping away as I write this, but there are things I have to tell you, things you need to know. I can hear the Kyuubi approaching, even as I feel my own life's blood slowly leak away from and I prepare for what will certainly be my death. If you're reading this letter, then that means you've either obtained the rank of Chunin, or have awakened our bloodline. I'm pretty sure it's going to be the later, let's just call it mother's intuition. Now if you're anything like me, then you're pretty pissed at the old monkey for keeping who I am a secret from you for so long, but please don't be. I asked Sarutobi to keep it a secret until either of those conditions were met. The reasons for that are a bit complicated, but the truth of the matter is I made a lot of enemies throughout my life, some for my actions as kunoichi and others for simply being who I am. I know that a great deal of them wouldn't think twice about attacking my son to either get some petty vengeance against me in the afterlife or to see our bloodline wiped out or brought under their control. Either way, if anyone found out about your heritage before you were capable of defending yourself, your life would be in a constant state of danger, something I could never allow to happen, especially without me there to protect you. The same fact goes for your father, so please don't try to find out anything about who he is from the old monkey. You'll get a scroll from him when you reach Chunin rank if you haven't already. Just remember, my little maelstrom, your father and I loved you more than anything, even before you were born. When your father found out he was going to be a dad, he was literally bouncing off the walls in joy. Now, before I get distracted by my memories, you need to learn the truth about your heritage from my side of the family. As I said before, my given name is Kushina Uzumaki, but that's not my real name, or at least it's not my birth name. My real name is Kushina Kurosaki Ikeda, heiress to both the Kurosaki and Ikeda clans of the Yuzushiogakure no Sato, village hidden by the whirling tides of the Yuzu no Kuni, land of whirlpools. While the Whirling Tides village was one of the smallest of the hidden villages, it was also one of the oldest and strongest. That was mostly due to the three bloodline clans that lived there, the Ishida, Kurosaki, and Korea clans. All three clans were the oldest in the village, all being direct descendants of the village's legendary founder, who first gathered his children and their families together on the small island nation of Yuzu to form what would later become Yuzushiogakure. Despite their distant blood ties, the clans never truly got along, particularly the Kurosaki and Ishida clans. In the beginning it started out as nothing more than an intense rivalry between the two families, but as years passed they grew to hate one another. Civil war between the two clans, with the rest of Yuzushio stuck in the middle, seemed almost inevitable, but the two heirs of the clans sought a way to build a peace and mend the hatred between the two clans. Their names were Yuzu Kurosaki and Yuryu Ishida, your grandmother and grandfather. It was through this shared desire for peace that the two met and fell in love. Seeing their union as a way to reunite the clans and bring about peace, the two married in secret and produced an heir to both clans, me. Sadly, their hopes that my birth would lead to peace were shattered when the circumstance of my birth became known to the clans. Instead of forming a bond of family and love between them, my birth became a spark for hatred and betrayal. Accusations were thrown about one clan heir seducing the other in an attempt to steal the other clan's power, despite the pleas of both young heirs that it wasn't true. It all came to head when both clans soon ordered my death, claiming it was the only way to prevent the civil war from beginning. My parents refused and fled Yuzu, coming to Konoha, where they hoped to live out the rest of their lives in relative peace. Sadly, their desertion was the final straw. Both clans blamed the loss of their heir on the other, pronouncing claims of kidnapping or murder. The love that my parents had hoped would prevent the war actually started it. The civil war raged for many years until both clans were nearly wiped out. Seeing an opportunity for conquest and the destruction of one of their oldest enemies, a combined shinobi force from Iwa, Kiri, and several other villages launched an attack on Whirlpool, destroying the majority of what remained and angering our former home's allies and starting what was known as the Third Great Shinobi War. While all this occurred, my parents raised me in Konoha, keeping our identities a secret from all save the current Hokage, Sarutobi. The old monkey, who was old, but not as old at the time, took pity on our family and offered us sanctuary in the village. My parents accepted and took the name Uzumaki, in honor of our lost homeland. The rest, as they say, is history. I grew up and awakened both my family's bloodlines, much to the surprise of my parents. They guessed that since both of their clans shared a common ancestor, and their bloodlines carried a common root, they were able to safely recombine in my body. I became a strong kunoichi of the leaf, met and married your father, and lived a relatively happy life. I'm afraid your grandparents died near the end of the war, fighting to defend their new home with all their might. The happiest day of my life was the day I found out I was pregnant with you. I dreamed of raising you and teaching you after you awakened our bloodline. Sadly, like my parents, my dreams were not meant to come true. On the night of your birth, the Kyubi no Yoko attacked our village, and you were chosen to be its container. Don't hate the Yandame for picking you, Naruto. He had no other choice if he was going to save our village, and I know forcing the fate of a Jinchuriki on you hurt him in unimaginable ways. The Yandame had faith in the village, hoping that they'd see you as a hero for helping him stop the fox. But I've always been a more pragmatic person, and I doubt it'll turn out the way he wished it. But no matter what, I want you to stay strong. You are the last full-blooded heir to both the Kurosaki and Ishida clans, two of the strongest and oldest clans to walk the world. Stay strong for me, for your ancestors, and most importantly for yourself, and remember that I will always love you and watch over you. Your loving Kasan, Kushina Kurosaki Ishida. P.S. Attached to the bottom of this scroll are 4 more seals. These are a special combination of blood and storage seals that your father designed. The man may have been a bit of a dope at times, but he knew his seals. Just swipe some of your blood across one and it'll release the items stored inside. The one on the left is from your grandfather Yuryu, and contains information on the Ishida clan's part of our bloodline and a few other items. The next is from your grandmother Yuzu, and it contains information the Kurosaki's aspect of our bloodline and some items from her as well. The next one is from me and contains a few mementos and a gift for you. Lastly, the rightmost seal contains a gift from your father. Tears were leaking from the Naruto's eyes as he finished the letter. His family really did care about him. That was always the hardest part, growing up alone, never knowing whether or not he was a mistake, or if his parents had died or simply abandoned him. This little letter did so much, answered so many painful questions. It told him he would have been loved, he would have had a pair of parents that cared for him and raised him. She really did love me, he whispered softly. Sarutobi nodded his head slowly, his eyes half closed in remembrance of dear friends now lost. Your mother loved you more than life itself. I remember the day she found out she was going to be a mother. She was jumping around my office squealing like a schoolgirl. The old fire shadow chuckled softly at the memory. What about my dad? Asked the blonde. Before Sarutobi could speak again, he continued, I know you can't tell me who he is until I make Chunin, but can you at least tell me what happened to him, and what he and my mom were like? He asked desperately, hungry for some new knowledge of the parents he just discovered he had. Sarutobi slowly looked at the boy before nodding his head. Your father died bravely, fighting to protect our village from the Kyubi. He was a truly great man that I was glad to call a friend, honest, loyal, strong, and always willing to work for what he desired. All traits I know you inherited from him, stated the old man warmly, getting a small, happy grin from the young blonde. However, I think you get most of your personality from your mother. She was headstrong, stubborn as a mule when she made up her mind about something, never willing to give up, and had a love of ramen that rivaled your own, not to mention the fact that she was quite the mischievous prankster during her youth. She was probably just as loyal as your father, maybe even more so, but people had to earn her loyalty. But once earned, she'd rather die than betray a person who trusted her. He finished fondly, recalling the vivacious young girl who'd stolen his successor's heart. What about the yandame? Asked the blonde curiously, getting a raised eyebrow from Sarutobi. From the letter it sounded like my mom knew him. He explained. That she did. Your mother was actually a childhood friend of the yandame's. They attended the academy together, and became rather close after graduating. Answered the Hokage honestly. It was true enough, though not the entire story. The two sat for nearly an hour, the Hokage telling him stories about his mother, and occasionally bits about his father without letting out who he was. As the night dragged on, Naruto let out a large yawn. Looking at the clock, the Sandame noticed how late it had gotten. Well, I think it's about time for you to head home. Before you leave, I have another gift for you. Reaching down, the old Kage pulled out a small set of keys and a map. These are the keys and a map to your mother's family house. It's not extremely large, but I think you'll like it. I've had people keep it clean and in good repair since your mother died, and it's still furnished. Thanks, old man, stated Naruto warmly. He hadn't completely forgiven the old Kage yet, but he appreciated the gesture all the same. I just wish I had more time before team assignment so I could study the scrolls and stuff Mom left me explaining about my new abilities. He added as an afterthought as he stood and stretched, working out the kinks from sitting in a chair for over an hour. An idea suddenly hit the elder Sarutobi. Well, Naruto, you may just get that wish, he stated with a slight smirk. When the blonde raised an eyebrow in question, the old Hokage continued, given Irika's injuries, we'll have to delay team placement for a bit. There's also the fact that, with your graduation, we'll have to rearrange the teams we'd already decided on. Then there's the matter of Mizuki's betrayal. Given the animosity he showed you, I wouldn't be surprised if he had some hand in you failing the exam. Given the circumstances, we'll have to launch a full investigation into his time as a teacher at the academy, which could take a while to complete. All that combined with the work and preparations associated with the upcoming Chunin exams in Suna means we'll have to delay team placements for quite a while. How long, old man? Asked a slightly excited blonde. He knew that this was just another way for the old man to try and make things up to him, and if he kept it up, he'd earn the blonde's forgiveness pretty soon. About 3 months would be my best guess, answered the old Kage. I'll be sure to send a message when the exact date is set. The blonde's face split into a wide smile. Thanks, Ogigi. I really appreciate this, he said warmly. It's the least I can do, Naruto, responded the Sandaime with a warm grin. As the blonde turned to leave, he spoke up again. Oh, there's one more thing. Given the fact that you've awakened your mother's Kekai Genkai, I'll have to make an announcement to the council. When that happens, I'll need you to be in attendance for a few other announcements. It'll probably happen in the next week or so. I'll send someone to get you when the time comes. The blonde nodded his head and left the office, nose buried in the map that would lead him to his new home. As the blonde left, the Hokage let out a tired sigh. At least I'm halfway done. Now I have to deal with the truly dangerous part, thought the elderly Hokage as he pressed a button on his intercom and stated, please send in Nico now. A few moments later, the purple-haired Kunoichi entered the office. You sent for me, Hokage-sama? Asked the Umbu in a calm voice. Yes, I did, but please remove your mask, Yugao. The information and task I have for you is a personal one, stated the old Hokage seriously. Nodding her head, the young woman removed her mask to reveal a young woman with a beautiful face with sharp features and narrow, green eyes. What is this about, Hokage-sama? Taking in a deep breath and preparing for what was to come, the elderly Sarutobi spoke again. Kushina's son is alive, he stated calmly. This brought an immediate reaction to the young Kunoichi. Her eyes widened in shock before quickly narrowing in anger. You lied to us? Growled out the woman. You told us he died in the Kyuubi attack. Why? Finished the woman in a snarl. The Sandaime answered slowly, to keep the boy safe. You know how many people wanted Kushina's head, or her bloodline for that matter, he stated calmly, hoping to keep the woman's temper in check and not add any fuel to the fire. We could have protected him. Hate and I would have adopted him in a heartbeat, and protected him from anyone stupid enough to try anything. It was the least we could have done for our sensei's son, growled out the woman as glared at the old Kage. I know, Yugao, but could the two of you have watched him every moment of every day? You know how ruthless the types of enemies Kushina made, both inside and outside the village, could be, answered the Hokage, his voice never losing its calm tone. We still had the right to know, returned the woman, though her voice had lost some of its heat before the Hokage's logic. Who is he? She asked quietly, before a look of realization struck her. It's Naruto, isn't it? He's Sensei's son. Yes, answered Sarutobi before raising an eyebrow and asking, how did you know? The sword he was carrying. It looked just like Kushina's, and it gave off the same unusual aura, answered the woman before sighing and slumping into the chair Naruto had just vacated. To be honest, Hokage-sama, I always suspected the boy was actually Kushina's. He acted so much like her, and I didn't really buy the bit about you giving him that name to honor her and her son's memory, stated the now exhausted Umbu. You always were an incredibly smart girl, Yugao, and I know that Kushina would be proud of what you've accomplished, stated the old Kage fondly with a slight nod of his head. Now I've got a new mission for you, but bear in mind it'll require you to leave Umbu for some time and go back to being a regular jounin. What's the mission, Hokage-sama? Asked a now curious Yugao. I'd like you to volunteer to act as Naruto's team sensei, stated a grinning Hokage. Either you or Gekko would be the best choice since you know more about Kushina's bloodline than any other active jounin, and since Haide's only a Tokubetsu jounin, you're the one best qualified for the job. If you do choose to accept, I'm quite certain I can make it happen unless one of the other Jounin has some spectacular trick up their sleeves. A large smile split Yugao's face as she stood back up and saluted. I would be honored to accept this mission, Hokage-sama, stated the smiling Kunoichi. Excellent. Now here are the files for the rest of the graduating class. You'll need to select your other 2 genin carefully and have a good argument for them since I can't show any favorites in the final decision. I hope you'll be able to create a good team with our young Naruto. There will be another Jounin meeting in a few weeks to finalize the new formations, instructed the old Kage as he handed her a small stack of files. Late at night, Eastern Residential District, Konoha. Naruto had arrived at the Uzumaki household. Standing outside, the young blonde couldn't help but stare. The building wasn't that impressive, a bit big, yeah, but nothing extraordinary. It was a large 2-story manor building, designed in a traditional style with a slightly slanted tile roof, and large front and back yards fenced in by a wood panel fence. It looked like it was probably built for a large or extended family to live in together. It was no mansion, but from looks alone it could probably house over a dozen people comfortably. It was located in a small neighborhood in the eastern side of the village, within walking distance of the Hokage's tower and the village's main square. All in all, it seemed to be nothing more than a standard family or clan home. However, it wasn't the house itself that had caused the blonde to stop and stare, but what it represented. This was the house he would have been raised in, the place he would have called home. Finding out he'd had a family that loved him in a letter was one thing, but seeing something that actually proved and represented it was something else entirely. Taking a few deep breaths to ease his racing heart, the blonde walked toward the fence's gate. Looking at the small map the Hokage had given him, and the small note on the back that indicated the house's defenses, the blonde began to search for the small seal that was supposed to be on the gate. From what the note had said, all he needed to do was place a small bit of his blood on the seal when he first entered, and the house's seal matrix would allow him entry. He'd have to apply more blood to the matrix's main identification seal if he didn't want to have to prick his finger every time he wanted to enter the grounds, but that would come after he'd actually entered the house. After a few moments of searching, Naruto finally found the seal he needed. It was slightly hidden under the doorbell at the main gate, hidden out of normal sight, but easy enough to find if someone, particularly someone with shinobi training, looking for it knew it was there. Biting his thumb again, the blonde swiped a small amount of blood across the seal. A moment later, the entire gate glowed with a dull white light signifying the security seals had deactivated. Taking in another deep breath, the blonde slowly pushed open the wooden doors of the gate before slowly walking up the path across the lawn to the front door. Removing the key the Hokage had given him, the blonde slowly unlocked the door and stepped inside to start exploring his new home. The first story of the house had most of the amenities: a kitchen, a dining room, a pair of bathrooms, couple sitting rooms, a large bath, and even a small library, while the second floor had over a dozen bedrooms and a couple more bathrooms. It was the main sitting room, however, that caught the young blonde's attention, or rather what was inside it. Sitting across the mantel on the side of the room was a large set of pictures. Naruto slowly approached the largest one in the center. Resting in the frame was a picture of 3 people standing in front of this very house. On the right stood a man dressed in a form-fitting white tunic and a set of white pants, both marked with blue stripes running throughout them, forming cross designs and blue along the fringes. Across the man's shoulders was a short white mantle also bearing the blue cross designs. On his right wrist was a silver cross-shaped pendant linked to a silver chain of some kind. He was a lean man, about average in height, with deep, raven black hair and piercing, cerulean blue eyes covered by a pair of box-rimmed glasses. Everything about the man, from his strong posture to the very aura that seemed to surround him, spoke of a sense of authority and discipline. On the opposite side stood a young woman with light brown hair that hung in front of her soft, dark brown eyes. She was slightly shorter than average and dressed in a loose, black set of hakama shirt and pants with the jet black sheathed form of a katana resting easily in her solid white obi. While the man's appearance spoke of strict discipline, the woman seemed to generate an aura of kindness and warmth. Standing in between the two was a tall girl of about 15 years with bright red hair and the same dark brown eyes of the older woman. She was dressed in what Naruto could only describe as a combination of the two adults' clothing. She wore black hakama pants with a pair of blue stripes going down both legs and meeting a broader blue line that circled the knee to form a pair of cross-like symbols on each leg. She also wore a loose black jacket with long flowing sleeves and the same blue lines forming a cross pattern at her elbows. Underneath the jacket was a form-fitting white tunic shirt that had a large 8-sided cross design across the chest in the same blue lines. Atop the girl's head was a small bucket hat colored in alternating strands of black and blue. Lastly, resting against her hip in a deep blue obi was the sheathed form of a jet black katana, and on her right wrist was a cross similar to the older man's. It was the girl's face, however, that caught his eye, a face very similar to his own. Tears again began to leak from the blonde's eyes as he realized who these 3 were. Ajisen, Obasan, Okasan. He whispered quietly as he traced his fingers across the figures in the picture. Slowly, the blonde looked at the other photos lining the mantel, keeping the center one still firmly locked in his grasp. There was a picture of his grandmother and grandfather both looking slightly younger as they stood in front of the house, his grandmother's holding the wrapped bundle of his infant mother. As the pictures moved down the mantel, time seemed to progress with them. The next one had his mother as a toddler, then a few of her as an academy student. After the spot where the center one was, probably taken at her graduation day, the pictures of his mother seemed to progress further. The last one resting on the edge of the mantel showed Kushina sitting in a chair holding her slightly swollen belly with her parents standing next to her smiling proudly. It must have been taken just months or weeks prior to their deaths in the war, since Naruto knew the war ended only a few months before the Kyuubi attack that also signified his birth. Naruto was curious as to why there were no pictures of his dad with his mom, but he guessed it was part of the whole secrecy thing. Wouldn't help much to keep it a secret if there were pictures of them together, thought the blonde. Naruto knew he needed to get some sleep, but he seriously doubted his ability to fall asleep at the moment. Instead, still carrying the picture of his family in his hands, the blonde decided to head for the dining room to study the contents of the seals his mother had mentioned in her letter. Before he left the room, the blonde found the main security seal exactly where the note had said it would be, hidden behind a wall hanging just behind where the center picture had been, and swiped a small amount of blood across it, locking him into the security seals. Finding his way to the dining room and seating himself at the head of the large table that filled the room, the blonde gently put the photo of his family down, before reaching into one of his pockets and pulling out his mother's letter. Looking at the 4 blood/storage seals resting on the bottom, Naruto slowly considered which one he should open first. Taking a look at the picture now resting by his left elbow, the blonde decided to start with his grandmother's scroll. Biting his finger, the blonde swiped a little bit of blood across the appropriate seal and, in a puff of thick smoke, several scrolls appeared in front of him. Resting on the bottom was a large scroll with the kanji for butterfly stamped across the center. Next to it rested a small pile of normal-looking scrolls all with different labels, and resting atop the small pile of scrolls was another letter. Deciding that it would be best to read the letter before his curiosity got the better of him, the blonde picked up the small handwritten scroll and began to read. The handwriting in the scroll was soft and slightly messy, but still easily readable. To my little Mago, grandchild. My name is Yuzukurasake, former second seat of the 4th Division of the Suryidai, Court of Pure Souls, Jounin of Yuzushiogakure and Kanehagakure, and your grandmother. If you're reading this, then I guess I'm no longer among the living. I'm afraid that's how it goes sometimes. Your mother had your Ajisen, and I write these after she found out she was pregnant so we could explain the abilities our families possessed even if we were no longer among the living when you awakened your bloodline. I thought she was being a bit overly worrisome. She gets that from your grandfather, but your mother has always had very good instincts, something that was quite common among the women of our clan. So I'm just going to go along with it, and I guess you reading this letter now just proves her right again. If I never got the chance to tell you in person, then I want you to know that both your grandfather and I thought the world of you even before you were born. Finding out he was going to be a grandfather was one of the few times I actually got to see a smile cross the lips of that emo of a man I call my husband. He always was a bit of detached, but that's one of the reasons I love him. Anyway, before I get a bit too distracted by my memories, I think I should start explaining our family's bloodline. The Kurosei clan's bloodline, the Zanpakuto, soul-cutting sword bloodline, has earned us several names as time has rolled by. Soul Reapers, Death Swordsmen, and even Shinigami Shadows have all been names and titles others have used to describe our clan's abilities. My personal favorite was always Soul Reaper, it just sounds so cool. Our family's Kekai Genkai has 3 main abilities. The first is that our chakra reservoirs are at least triple the normal size for most ninja, giving us immense levels of chakra reserves and endurance. The second ability is longevity. The members of our clan could live much longer than normal people. That combined with the fact that both the Ikeda and Korea clans shared this ability led to our village being called the Village of Longevity by some. The third aspect of our bloodline is the one that our clan is best known for, our ability to manifest our Zanpakuto, the soul-cutting swords that we wield in battle. In a moment of crisis, our chakra naturally reinforces itself and solidifies into a solid form, a sword, our Zanpakuto. When it comes to our Zanpakuto, there are several things you need to know. First, each blade has a spirit, a soul. You should also know that each sword can have multiple souls, the most ever recorded being 9. By speaking a special command and calling out the sword's name, we cause a release that alters the blade and gives it amazing abilities. There are 2 levels to this release. The first is called Shurkai, the initial release of the Zanpakuto's power. This form is activated as soon as the spirit within the blade acknowledges the wielder by granting him or her their name, and they are strong enough to hear the name in return. The second level is known as Bankai, or the final release. Unlike Shurkai, to release Bankai requires a great deal of effort and training. A ninja usually has to reach Chunin, or even Jounin level before they're capable of unleashing the second state for even one of their Zanpakuto. The powers and abilities of the Zanpakuto's Shurikai and Bankai are related to the sword's soul. In the history of the Kurosei clan there have been hundreds of different Zanpakuto souls recorded, some repeating through generations at random, some being passed down family lines, and others being born only to a single individual. When neither of these levels are released, the sword is in what is called the sealed state. In this form the blade has a couple of unique abilities as well. First, you can alter the sword's shape and size between that of a tanto, a wakizashi, a katana, or a nodachi by channeling chakra through the blade and mentally picturing the desired state. It is also stronger and sturdier than any normal blade and can even be used to channel your chakra. Second, the sword regenerates over time. Even if it is shattered into 1,000 pieces, the sword will eventually regenerate and return to normal given enough time. Third, since our Zanpakuto are parts of our soul, we can wield them on a nearly instinctive level, making our clan natural swordsmen. This is just as true with our Shurikai or Bankai states, allowing us to wield their powers naturally as soon as we obtain them. However, it still requires massive amounts of training to fully master our blades, both in their sealed and released states. The Kurosei clan even developed our own style of kenjutsu specifically designed for wielding our Zanpakuto, but I'll explain that later. Finally, if anyone other than the sword's owner tries to wield our Zanpakuto, they'll be in for a rather nasty shock. Trust me, you'll want to see it when it happens if you've inherited anything from me. Our bloodline isn't the only thing I'm making sure you inherit from me. In the small stack of scrolls that are stored with this letter is our clan's fighting techniques called Zankansoki. Zankansoki is divided into 4 key aspects, each represented by part of the name. Zan represents our clan's sword fighting techniques. It is referring to our family's kenjutsu style named Zanjutsu, cutting techniques. It is a style that is entirely focused on mastering the use of our Zanpakuto. It is a fearsome style that takes advantage of both our clan's increased endurance and our sword's natural abilities. There are several techniques and sub-styles that focus on using the sword's ability to change size and shape while in combat. It also gives basic instructions on how to integrate the different Shurikai and Bankai abilities into normal combat. In actual combat, it combines our natural endurance with extreme speed and strength to create a truly dangerous combat style. Ken refers to hand-to-hand combat or taijutsu. While not as often used by members of our clan who've awakened their Kekai Genkai and gained their Zanpakuto, our clan still instills a healthy study of taijutsu to make sure that we can fight even without our swords. Our clan style is called Hakuda, white strikes, and it is a combination of several different taijutsu styles. It includes grapples, punches, kicks, elbow and knee strikes, dodges, blocks, and dozens of other offensive and defensive techniques. Hakuda is designed to be adaptable, enabling a wielder to be able to alter his style and confront any type of combat situation they find themselves in. So refers to movement techniques. Our clan developed a special school of techniques we call Hoho, step method, that allows us to focus our chakra into our legs and feet in order to solidify the air beneath us and allow us to gain traction on thin air and stop ourselves from falling. The key technique to Hoho is called Shunpa, flash step, which rapidly accelerates the body's movement, allowing us to travel faster than the eye can follow, similar to the Shunshin no Jutsu, body flicker technique, most ninja use. Unlike the Shunshin, Shunpa was designed for combat use, allowing us to close distances at incredible speeds. Lastly, Ki refers to ninjutsu and our clan's special techniques known as Kido, spirit or demon way. Before I explain Kido to you, I should let you know that most of our clan had a powerful lightning affinity. And I base this off the fact that most of the Kaido techniques I've seen that actually involve elements use lightning. One of the scrolls I left you holds a number of lightning-style ninjutsu, along with some instructions on how to train your lightning element. Now Kido is a special type of technique our clan developed. Since we constantly wield our swords in battle, forming hand signs to create jutsu is incredibly difficult. So through years of training, research, and trial and error, our clan developed a number of special jutsu that, instead of relying on hand signs, use incantations to channel and shape chakra. These incantations usually take as long as forming hand seals, though the higher level spells can take a bit more time than usual, but leave our hands free enough to wield our blade. With training, one is even able to use them without the incantations, but this severely limits their power, usually cutting it in half at least. We also have several other techniques to mask our incantations to prevent opponents from being able to predict them if they've heard them before. Kido are ranked by level from 1 to 99, with 1 being the simplest and 99 being the most dangerous. Kido can be divided into 3 main subtypes: Bakuto, way of binding; Heido, way of destruction; and Ido, way of healing. Bakuto spells are the broadest category of Kido techniques. They deal with communication, binding, sealing, and tracking, along with any other type of spell that isn't classified under Heido or Ido. Heido spells are attack spells, spells designed to deal damage to objects or harm our foes. They mostly either attack using lightning, due to our clan's affinity, or using chakra directly, though there are a few that use the other elements as well. The last type of Kido is Ido, which are healing spells. Unlike Bakuto and Heido, Ido is not separated into levels or different spells. They simply channel chakra to heal damage or restore drained chakra reserves of others or heal yourself. Now there's one other scroll I put in the seal. It's the large one with the butterfly kanji on it. That's the summoning contract for the butterfly clan. It's been in the Kurosei clan for generations, and as the last heir I was its primary holder. When I decided to leave Yuzu, the butterfly clan decided to come with me. Their clan, along with the Akaida's summons, disliked the needless warfare our clans were preparing for, as well as their orders to kill a helpless infant, and asked to be taken with us. Your mother signed both scrolls when she was younger, and I'm sure you will as well. Now the butterfly clan may not be extremely powerful in a direct fight, but they have a lot of unique and amazing abilities, but I'll let them tell you themselves. Stay strong, my little one, and always stay true to yourself. Love. You're always loving Obasan, Yuzu Kurosei. Naruto smiled a little as he finished his grandmother's letter. She seemed like such a sweet person, and he was glad that both her and his grandfather had been so excited to be grandparents. He couldn't help but feel extremely excited as he finished the letter. The techniques and abilities his Obasan had described had sounded so cool, and he couldn't wait to get started learning them. Putting aside the notion to start practicing right away, he gently lifted the small pile of scrolls and set them off to the side further down the table. I'd better open all the seals and find out everything that I'll need to learn before I get caught up in training, thought the blonde as he finished moving the scrolls. Looking back at his mother's letter, the young blonde bit his finger again and swiped another of the seals, this one belonging to his grandfather. There was another puff of smoke and more scrolls now covered the desk. Like his grandmother's seal, there was a large scroll, only this one was marked with the kanji 4 sparrow stamped on it, and several scrolls lying next to it. The only difference was that there were several items lying with the second set of scrolls, some wrapped around them and other draped over them. Naruto noticed a set of small silver capsules about the size of his finger with a 4-pointed star engraved on them, long silver tubes about the length of his forearm and half as wide with a small handle at the end, a long white glove marked with the same blue cross that decorated most of his grandfather's and mother's clothing, and a silver bangle marked with a cross in the center of a sunburst with a small cross attached to it by a short chai. Deciding to read his grandfather's letter before touching anything, the blonde sought out the appropriate piece of parchment. Finding it, the blonde discovered it was wrapped in a small silver chain complete with a silver cross at the end. Just like the ones Mom and Gramps were wearing in the picture, thought the blonde softly. Taking a slow, deep breath, the blonde unwound the bracelet from the small scroll. As the bangle came fully unwound, Naruto noticed a strange glint on the silver metal. Before, in a sudden flash, the small bracelet had suddenly wrapped itself around his wrist, the small cross dangling below and glowing in a gentle silver light for a moment. After a moment of futile struggling to remove the chain, the blonde decided to read the letter and hope it held the answer to what had just happened. The writing inside was crisp and done with a practiced hand, reinforcing the blonde's view of his grandfather as a strict person. To my young Mago. First off, if the chain that was wrapped around this letter has now linked itself to your wrist, please don't panic. That is merely an indicator that you've activated the Akaida clan's bloodline, the Quincy, Monk of Destruction. Don't worry if you can't take it off, just apply a bit of churka to the small latch on the back of the chain, and it'll come right off. It's designed to be physically impossible to remove without breaking to prevent it from being lost either during combat or while moving at high speeds. Naruto let out a small sigh of relief before he returned to reading his grandfather's letter. Now that that's settled, I suppose I should introduce myself. As you are probably well aware of, I'm your grandfather Yuryu Ishida. Former Stern Ritter, Star Knight, P the prodigy of the Vanden Reihi, Invincible Empire, and Jounin of both Yuzushiogakure and Konohagakure. Your mother had your grandmother, and I write these letters just in case either we nor her were still alive when you came of age. When I questioned her on why, she merely stated that she had a bad feeling. While not a superstitious man myself, I have always and will always be a pragmatist, and considering the dangers of the time we currently find ourselves living in, I see no real harm in being prepared for the worst-case scenario. In case I don't live to tell you this myself, know that whatever you do, whoever you become, and however you do it, your grandmother and I will always be proud of you. I remember the day your mother told us she was pregnant. After calming myself down from my desire to kill your father, who I shall mention deserved it since he impregnated my daughter out of wedlock, even if they were already engaged and married days after finding out it was the principle of the thing. I watched as your grandmother hopped and skipped around the living room of our home squealing and dancing with your mother. I also remember the look of sheer depression that appeared on her face when I mentioned we must be getting old since we're becoming grandparents. Sayuzu-chan has always been an overly emotional one, but it was one of the things that made me fall for her in the first place. Anyway, now that I've had my sentimental moment, I suppose I should tell you about the Ishida clan's Kekai Genkai you've inherited. As I mentioned earlier, it is called the Quincy and has earned us a unique nickname, the Quincy, a slight alteration to our bloodline's name. As to the gifts our bloodline bestows on us, there are 3 major abilities. First, our clan members have a unique ability to draw in ambient chakra from our surroundings. As you know, all things release chakra on some levels, from the rocks and water, to the trees, insects, and animals. All things release chakra on some level. This ability allows our clan to draw in that ambient chakra and convert it to our own uses, allowing us to refill our reserves much quicker than most. Second is our clan's longevity. We can live much longer than normal humans. This ability, combined with the fact that the other 2 main clans of our home village also possess similar abilities, earned Yuzushio the nickname the Village of Longevity. Finally, due to our ability to absorb ambient chakra, our clan's own chakra is naturally more flexible than others. While this may not seem like much compared to some other bloodlines, the Ikeda clan used it, along with our own naturally creative and innovative nature, to make special tools that grant us a number of special abilities when we focus our chakra through them. The best example is our signature weapon. Before you read any further, it's best for you to see it for yourself. Focus some chakra into the little cross attached to the chain on your wrist, and keep it flowing. Deciding to do as his grandfather's letter dictated, Naruto focused a bit of his chakra into the small cross resting against his wrist. The effect was immediate. The cross suddenly shot forward to hover over the palm of his hand and began to emit a large amount of bright, blue-white light. The light stretched outward from his extended hand, forming a long shaft of blue-white light about as thick as his forearm. The length of the shaft gently curved backward, forming a slight crescent shape before a thin strand of light connected the 2 points, forming a giant, simplified longbow made of pure chakra. Naruto stared at the bow for a moment before cutting off the chakra flow to the cross, and the bow instantly winked out. The blonde couldn't help but notice that he hardly felt any form drain from forming the chakra bow. Channeling the chakra back to the cross, the bow quickly reformed. Naruto curiously pulled back on the bow's string. As the string reached its zenith, Naruto felt a slight pulling was the best word he could use to describe it, on his chakra. Allowing the chakra to flow through the pull, the blonde watched in amazement as a large, roughly arrow-shaped mass of chakra burst forward from his knuckles where he gripped the string. The end where the arrow met his fingers was a small fire of sparking chakra, and the tip was a broad point. Deciding to test his new weapon, Naruto took aim at a tree visible through a nearby open window, more specifically a large knothole near the tree's center. The blonde was glad he'd opened most of the windows in the house to let some fresh air circulate through the slightly stuffy building, before slowly releasing his hold on the arched string. In a blur of motion and a flash of light, the arrow sped forward, out the window, and bit deep into the side of tree in the center of the knothole, right where the blonde had aimed. A moment after it hit, the blonde saw the arrow disperse into several motes of light, leaving behind only a deep scar and a slight burn mark in the wood as the only side had ever existed. Grinning madly to himself, the blonde released the chakra forming the bow and returned to his grandfather's letter. Hopefully, you just witnessed the birth of your Quincy bow, the first stage of your Seishin Haiki, spirit weapon, the masterpiece of the Ishida tool crafting. Each weapon uses one of our crosses as a focus to shape our chakra into a weapon. Like your grandmother's sword, it goes through 3 stages. The first is simply called Raikyu, Spirit Bow. This is the form you've just awakened, however it is far from complete. The bow is the first weapon an Ishida learns to wield, believed to be our clan's founder's favored weapon, but as we learn to master our abilities we shape and alter it to suit us as individuals, turning each bow into an individual weapon. In order to complete it you must go through a special training process using the Sanrei glove, the large white glove lying on top of one of the scrolls. The scroll itself explains how to make more and how to go through the test itself in more detail. While most wait until they have been genin for a prolonged period of time, usually going through it shortly before attempting to become Chunin, if you've inherited your mother and grandmother's stamina, then I'd say you could do it after about a month of training with your natural abilities. The glove acts as a dampener for your ability to absorb chakra from your surroundings, making it a lot harder to form your bow. After you manage to form a bow with the glove on, you'll go through a week of constant endurance training, constantly drawing and firing the bow while maintaining it under the glove's effects. Even without the glove, this feat is taxing on both the physical body and one's chakra, but once completed, your ability to draw in chakra from your surroundings will have reached a new level, greatly enhancing your abilities and using your bloodline, allowing your bow to take on a solid form, the true first state of our bloodline. However, once this training is finished, the glove should never be removed unless under dire conditions or after mastering the second stage. Doing so forces our bloodline to go beyond its limits, and forcing us into what is known as the Quincy Retsuto Shuduru, Destruction Sage, final form. The power this form grants is phenomenal, but once it has run its course it will force your bloodline abilities into hibernation for a prolonged period, and possibly end your life if your body is damaged badly enough. Forging the bow itself takes little to no chakra thanks to the effects of our first bloodline combined with the special design of the cross. The cross is naturally designed to focus our bloodline's ability to that point, so the chakra cost directly from us is negligible. Granted, forming Hairihi Byaferu, sacred destruction arrows, can take a toll if fired rapidly, but if you're anything like your mother and inherited your grandmother's reserves, it shouldn't be a problem for you. Since the bow and arrows are forged from our own chakra, wielding and firing them is like second nature to us, allowing near-perfect accuracy with them from the very beginning. There's also a scroll among the pile I left you that details our clan's own archery style. The second stage of your spirit weapon is called the Sai-Haiki, Holy Weapon. While the first stage focuses on improving your ability to harness and absorb chakra from your surroundings, the second stage focuses on learning to control and shape the chakra as it is absorbed. Through the training to unlock this stage, our clan learns to shape our chakra into a new weapon beyond the bow, a weapon perfectly suited for the individual, the Sai-Haiki. Like solidifying the bow, the process of forging your Sai-Haiki is a long and tiring one best left until you have obtained a degree of experience and mastery of your original bow. I beg you not to rush into it, particularly if you take after your mother's hot-headed nature. Each Sai-Haiki is unique, with its own personal abilities and powers, though most tend to focus on ranged weapons. I myself was a bow wielder, further enhancing my own abilities through refining my bow in his second stage, while your mother manifested chains that could bind chakra as easily as flesh. The final stage is called the Quinshi, Forishu Tendihai, Monk of Destruction, Complete Holy Form. The only way I can properly describe it is as a complete and controlled form of the Quinshi Retsudo Shuduru, a technique that boosts the strength and control of our bloodline to its very epitome. With it, the powers and abilities of our Sai-Haiki are further enhanced, granting them even greater power and control over the surrounding chakra. In this form, our clan is even able to counter weaker jutsu aimed at us by simply absorbing the incoming chakra, breaking the technique and using it to strengthen ourselves or break down physical objects and absorb them into our bodies as chakra. Now the Quincy Cross, the small chain and charm currently attached to your wrist, is not the only item our clan has created over the years. I'm going to explain a few of the most useful ones in this letter, and I've put a few samples in with it. The remainder are described in full detail in some of the other scrolls. There are two key materials we Ishida create to build all our weapons and tools. They are spiritually infused glass and silver. Both materials are specially created by the members of the Ishida clan, and their production was what made our clan so wealthy in the first place, not to mention making sure our family has not wanted for anything while we stayed in this village. You see, these materials are not only useful for combining with our bloodline, but are highly chakra conductive, making each piece worth a great deal to any craftsman, since chakra conductive materials are rarely found in nature, and our Quincy materials are the only ones known to be forged by human hands. I've left detail notes on how to craft both in my workshop. You can access it by pressing a special panel in the library. It's in the second bookshelf on the left from the main doorway, on the center shelf right behind the Ishida family history. The first item is called the Quincy Bangle, the small silver bangle with the cross attached, and it was specifically designed for those who've removed the samurai glove and lived. It acts in the opposite of the samurai glove, amplifying the abilities of our bloodline and allowing us to wield our powers again, though at a diminished level. It also accelerates the recovery time from the final form. It's worth noting that those who survive the final form and regain their powers using this tool have often awakened their second stage with the process as well. Next are the Jinto, silver tubes. They are the small capsules engraved with the pointed cross. They hold specially altered water that we create through a special process combined with channeling our chakra through the water, turning it into almost pure liquid chakra. They are probably the easiest Quincy tool to make, due to the fact that our clan has a naturally strong water affinity, which is why I also include a scroll on several water jutsu as well. The Jinto are used to cast special jutsu. These jutsu are unique because they require no chakra to be able to use, merely a charged Jinto and the proper activation. The incantations act as hand signs shaping and channeling the chakra stored inside the capsule to release the desired effects. The scroll, the strap of Jinto is wrapped around, contains both the instructions for crafting the Jinto and a list of most of the known incantations for the spells. Finally, there are the Seal Schneiders, German, soul cutter, or, more historically, the Zaraschneida, that which slits the soul, the long silver cylinders with the handles. These tools are both an incredible defensive tool and an excellent weapon, and are the primary tool carried by Quincy's after the cross. They primarily act as chakra absorbers, drawing in chakra much like our own bloodline does, but at a much faster rate. In its inactivated state, the seal act as an instant shield against chakra-based attacks or jutsu. By intercepting an incoming jutsu with one of these and activating it before impact, the chakra used to power the technique is absorbed and the attack cancelled. However, the amount of chakra a single seal can absorb is limited, and if more chakra than that is released, then the seal will overload. Normally, a seal can absorb up to a C or B rank jutsu depending on the skill of the wielder. Absorbing an A rank jutsu is possible but requires multiple seal Schneiders depending on the strength of the jutsu, and absorbing an S rank or higher jutsu would be nearly impossible without a dozen or more, if then. It is also possible to activate them without absorbing a jutsu by simply drawing on ambient chakra, but this takes a moment. Once activated, the head of the seal will release a long blade made of chakra, about 1/2 the length of the seal itself. The blade is constantly vibrating, acting in the same manner as chainsaw. It is used as either as a Quincy's melee weapon, though if you also inherited your mother's abilities you'll have little use for it as such, and as an arrow that, when fired correctly, is capable of piercing nearly anything. There are also several Jinto rituals that combine the Jinto with the seal for larger effects. Now, before you start to think that the Ishida rely solely on our tools, we have also developed several unique techniques to fully utilize our bloodline as well. The most common is called the Harenkyaku, flying screen step. It concentrates chakra below our feet, greatly boosting our speed and jump strength, much like your mother's Ho-Ho techniques. However, our ability has a key advantage. While Ho-Ho can slow down a fall or allow quick turns while midair, the Ikaida's Harenkyaku allows us to levitate on a small platform made of our own chakra. This is a very useful skill considering our primary abilities as archers, but must be used carefully since it can leave us highly visible and exposed to others' ranged attacks. The others are described more in the scrolls I left for you. Use them well. There should be one final item in the seal. The large scroll with the kanji for Sparrow imprinted on it. It is our clan's summoning contract for the Sparrow clan. When I decided to leave Yuzu, the leader of the Sparrow contract asked me to bring their contract with me, since they didn't want to be involved in a pointless war between kin, started because we refused to slay our own child. The Sparrows are a fierce and loyal summons. They serve both me and your mother well, and I'm sure they'll do the same for you. Stand proud and true, for you are Ishida and a Quincy. Your proud Ajizan, Yuri Ishida. Naruto was smiling once again as he finished his grandfather's letter. I guess I know where I inherited my handyman skills, he thought with a warm smile. The young blonde had always been good with his hands. It helped since he constantly had to do all the repairs and maintenance for his old apartment himself, since the old landlord refused to do anything. Guess I know now why the old team refused to help me, he thought, his mood souring slightly. Shaking his head to remove those unpleasant thoughts, the blonde gently picked up the small pile of scrolls and placed them next to his grandmother's. Looking back at the letter, the blonde once again bit, then swiped his thumb across the bottom, this time unlocking his mother's seal. With a much smaller poof of smoke, another letter, a small piece of paper, and a scroll appeared resting on the table. Picking up the letter, the blonde opened it to find another letter written in the same scrawling hand as the first. Dear Sochi, I know I don't have a lot to pass on to you since Mom and Dad handed down most of the bloodline-specific stuff, but I've got a few things to tell you. Since you inherited both the Ikeda and Kurosake bloodlines, your chakra reserves will be nearly limitless, considering you've got the Kurosake clan's immense reservoir and the Ishida's quick regeneration. You've also probably inherited both a strong lightning and water affinity as well. Just to make sure, I included a piece of chakra paper with this scroll as well. Just channel some chakra into it, and depending on how the paper reacts, it will show you your elemental alignment. If it burns, you have fire; crumbles, you have earth; splits, you have air; gets wet, you have water; and if it crinkles, you have lightning. Now I have included one other thing with this scroll. It's a scroll filled with the designs for a special uniform I had made. It combines elements of both the Kurosake and Ikeda clans' uniforms. Now you don't have to wear it, but it would mean so much to your poor, deceased mother if you did. If you decide to wear them, just go to the Urahara shop in town, and give the scroll to Mr. Urahara. He's an old friend of mine since I was little, and I know he'll treat you right, fox or no fox. There's a map to the shop at the bottom of this letter. Stay safe, my little maelstrom. Your loving Kaizen, Kushina Kurosake Ishida. Sigh, great guilt trip, Mom. Sighed out our blonde hero, before he looked at the picture of his mother standing between her parents. At least it looks pretty cool, stated the blonde with a soft smile. Truthfully, Naruto would have worn it even if she hadn't applied the guilt trip. It would be another way to feel linked to his family. I hope you're right about this Urahara guy, Mom. Guess I'll find out tomorrow, he whispered gently, before placing the scroll with the ones his grandparents left him before picking up the chakra paper. Channeling as much chakra as he could into the small piece of paper, the blonde watched as it split down the middle before one half became wet, and the other started crinkling. The blonde let out a low whistle. Well, I know where I got water and lightning, but where the hell did I get wind? Asked our blonde hero curiously, before his attention turned to the letter his mom had left him and the final seal. Could it be? The blonde's voice trailed off a bit before he bit and swiped his thumb a final time over his father's seal. Several scrolls and a letter appeared in a poof of smoke. Picking up the letter, the blonde began to read slowly, the handwriting strong but slightly sloppy. Dear Sochi, this is your old man. I know you want to know who I am, but I'm afraid that you're just going to have to wait until you hit Chunin to find out. Even if I can't tell you who I am right now, I want you to know that I love you with all my heart. I'm writing this letter as I prepare to go fight the Kyuubi. I hope that the yondaime is right, and your mother is wrong for once about the way the villagers will treat you. I sincerely do from the bottom of my soul. Now with this letter I've included several other scrolls. One contains a large number of wind jutsu. I know you'll probably inherit your mother's elements along with her bloodline, but just in case you also inherit my wind nature I've included them as well as a scroll on wind nature manipulation. The rest of the scrolls contain a basic guide to the Fuinjutsu, the art of seals. Your old man happens to be quite the whiz with seals himself, and these scrolls are the best you can learn on your own. In order to advance farther you'll need to find an experienced seal master to teach you, but until then learn what you can. I wish I'd listened to your mother when she told me what she and her parents were doing in case something like this happened so I could have spoken to you more, but I was a stubborn idiot who should have listened to his wife. I guess you'll have to wait until you reach Chunin before you hear more from me. Always proudly watching over you. Your loving Tozen. Guess I was right about the wind affinity, mumbled the blonde as he wiped away the tears that were forming in his eyes again. I wish you had too, Dad, whispered the blonde before he turned his attention to the scrolls resting in front of him. Seals, huh? Mumbled the blonde. Might as well learn what Dad could teach me, even if I'll probably never find a seal master willing to teach the demon brat, muttered the blonde before he gave off a long yawn. Looking out the opened window in front of him, the blonde noticed the rising sun. Guess I'll have to hold off on starting my training until tomorrow, or at least later today. Right now I need some sleep or I'm liable to blow something up on my first attempt. Laughed the blonde as he sorted out all the scrolls and resealed them back into the letter, before placing it back in his pocket. The blonde then went about closing and locking all the windows and doors in the house, before climbing the steps to where he'd found the master bedroom. The blonde gently placed his family picture on the nightstand by the bed before slipping out of most of his clothes and crawling under the covers. Looking at the picture of his family, and then around the room, the blonde let out a contented sigh. It's good to be home, whispered the blonde as he fell asleep. Where the hell am I? Came the scream of our blonde hero. Mere moments after drifting into sleep, our hero once again opened his eyes to find himself standing in the midst of a great sewer. The place was gigantic in size, easily as wide as any of the main streets in Konoha and at least 3 times that size and height, though the blonde couldn't be sure since the place's roof was covered in shadows. Along the walls were multiple pipes, all seemingly coming and going from the same source. The entire place was lit by a dreary red glow with no discernible source that filled the tunnel with dozens of looming shadows. All in all, in Naruto's humble opinion, this place was creepy as hell. How the fuck did I wind up in a sewer? Continued the blonde, his annoyance continuing to grow as looked around his new surroundings. 1 second I was going to sleep in my family's home, and the next I wake up in a sewer. Please Cammy, don't let it have been a dream, I couldn't take it if it was, moaned the blonde. As the blonde continued his tirade, he heard a voice seemingly whisper in his ear. Come, young one, it is time for us to meet. That voice. It's so familiar, but where have I heard it before? Thought the blonde before the answer hit him like a ton of bricks. It's the same voice I heard when I first called out to Beneheim. That means it wasn't just a dream, but where am I now? Come, young one, your answers await with me, came the whisper again. Guess I don't have much of a choice, thought the blonde as he shrugged before he started to walk toward the origin of the whisper. After what felt like an hour of drudging through the watery sewer tunnels, Naruto came to a set of steps leading to a large, ornate stone gate. Inscribed onto the massive pair of doors was a symbol, 9 swords circling a central spiral. Just beyond each sword was a vague figure, some human, others animalistic, while at the center of the spiral was what appeared to be a grinning mask shaped like a human skull. As Naruto approached, the doors began to slowly creak open, revealing the chamber beyond. It was a massive circular room made of dark red brick. A number of thick metal bars formed a flat wall opposite the doorway, seemingly forming a cage hollowed out of the wall itself. The only objects within the room were 9 tall pillars, 4 to each side and the 9th standing in front of the cage's center, as if standing guard over it. Atop each pillar was what Naruto thought were statues, though each was concealed by a swathe of shadows, making it impossible to see them in more detail than vague, shifting outlines. As Naruto stood in the center of the massive chamber, he looked around until he heard the voice once again, this time loud and clear. You have finally arrived, the voice proclaimed. Turning to where he thought the voice was coming from, Naruto saw it. One of the figures on top of one of the pillars on the left wall was moving. The figure seemed to step forward and fall slowly from its perch. As the figure fell, the shadows surrounding it began to dissipate, scattering like leaves on the wind and revealing the form hidden beneath. It was a beautiful woman, clothed in nothing but crimson red. She wore a dark, crimson red royal kimono decorated with flower and musical designs. Her lips were shaded a dark crimson as well, while her eyes glowed a lighter shade and were only augmented by the dark crimson eyeshadow she wore. Her hair was long and flowing, reaching down to hover just above her feet, and was colored a fiery crimson red. The only thing about the woman not decorated by the crimson coloring was her skin, which was pale and smooth. A single word floated into our blonde hero's mind as he recognized the figure. Beneheim, he whispered in soft shock. The sword spirit chuckled softly. You are correct, my master. I am Beneheim, the first of your Zanpakuto spirits. Her rich, musical voice seemingly echoing in the vast chamber. Where are we? Questioned the blonde. This place has many names, the inner world, the mindscape, some even call it the subconscious, but its name is meaningless. This is the place where we reside, a reflection of your own mind and soul, she answered simply. We? Asked Naruto. He remembered his obeisan's letter. You mean I have more than one Zanpakuto? Questioned the blonde excitedly. Correct, you hold 9 of us. Though whether or not all of us will contact you is wholly dependent on your own actions, answered Beneheim. The reason you are here now is that one of us wishes to speak to you. Who? Questioned the blonde. That would be me, Kit, said a voice from behind the blonde. It was sharp and slightly raspy, but still seemed to boom with power. Turning, the blonde's eyes locked on the pillar before the cage. From the top the pillar the shadow figure leapt, its shadowy cloak dissipating much like Beneheim's had. As the creature's form became clear, Naruto's breath became still. From the shadow emerged a giant fox covered in dark orange fur, standing at least 10 feet tall to the top of its shoulders and stretching at least twice if not thrice that in length. From its back came 9 flowing tails, and its forelimbs ended in human-like hands, complete with clawed fingers and thumb. The creature's ears were unusually long, almost rabbit-like in appearance, while its face was masked by patches of black fur. Its eyes were bright red and almost glowed with dark power. Kyubi, growled the blonde as his hands reached for the katana still sheathed at his waist as he prepared to attack the source of his misery. I wouldn't do that, Kit, considering harming me will only harm yourself, came the fox's snickering reply as it watched its host. Oh, and why's that? Growled the blonde. Because you're looking at one of your new Zanpakuto, replied the smirking fox. What? How in hell can you be a Zanpakuto? You're a Biju, questioned the blonde. Blame it on the Yondaime, Kit. When that little ninjin used that seal to bind me inside you, he altered it enough so that your bloodline would absorb a part of me into itself, turning me into a Zanpakuto. I'm not really complaining though. At least this way I'll get to spill some blood instead of being locked in a cage all the time I'm stuck with you, answered the fox, with a shrug of its massive shoulders. Okay, sighed the blonde. He really didn't understand what was going on, but for now he just trusts the seal the Yondaime made. His mom seemed to trust the guy, so he should too. Right. So I should call out to Kyubi when I want to awaken you? Questioned the blonde. That would not be a good idea when he was in the village. People would think he was now serving the monster or something. Then again, that would prove he wasn't Kyubi, but it wouldn't be much of an improvement. He'd go from being the demon brat to the monster's servant. Nope, when the seal absorbed and altered me I received a new name for my new form, answered the fox. And that name is? Asked a now curious blonde slash. My name is, started the fox before its voice suddenly disappeared. What? The fox chuckled again. It seems you are not yet ready to hear my name. Why do you say that? Because I just spoke it, and you didn't hear it. What are you? The blonde was cut off mid-sentence as a part of his grandmother's letter floated into his mind. When they are strong enough to hear the name in return, the letter had said. I'm not strong enough to hear your name yet? The fox shrugged. You have the power, but you lack the motivation, but I doubt you will have to wait long to find it. I personally can't wait to rip and rend my enemies asunder once more. Until then, goodbye, Kit. With those words the blonde began to fade away until he was completely gone. Ah. You didn't tell Kingy Boy about me yet, came a madly snickering voice from the cage behind Kyubi's pillar. He will learn of you soon enough, and when he does he will be ready, came Beneheim's strong rebuff. We'll see, princess, we'll see. Let's just hope our little king can get strong enough, quick enough, snickered the concealed figure before it launched into a psychopathic laugh. End dream sequence. Real world. Naruto started awake as he left his mindscape. Looking around frantically, the blonde soon realized he was back in his room in his family's house. The blonde took a few deep breaths to calm himself before sighing. That was either the freakiest dream ever or my life's going to keep getting more complicated, mumbled the blonde as he stood up and got out of bed. Looking out of a nearby window, the blonde noted the sun was pretty high in the sky, just starting on its downward slope, meaning it was about 1 or 2 in the afternoon. He'd crawled into bed about 6 or 7 in the morning, just as the sun was rising, meaning he'd gotten anywhere between 6 and 8 hours of sleep. It's too late to start training today, but I don't want to just waste it. I know, I'll visit that Urahara shop Mom told me about in her letter, decided the blonde. He'd gone to bed with his clothes on, only discarding his jacket and trousers onto the floor, so he didn't need to change. He made a mental note to send a few clones to gather most of his stuff from his old apartment, before gathering his things to heading out. He placed his mother's letter in one of his pockets, while slipping his sword in the belt line of his pants. It wasn't a perfect fit, but it would do until he could get some new clothes. Hopefully this Urahara guy would be able to help him with the rest of his clothing as well. While the blonde liked the color orange, he knew it wasn't exactly a ninja color. It took the blonde nearly an hour to find the place, and when he did he was less than impressed. The place looked pretty average to the blonde, a squat 2-story building with a green tiled roof with a wooden shed attached to one side and a large, plain white sign over the front of the door that had Urahara shop printed on it in large black kanji. It looked like just another general store from the outside. Taking in a deep breath, the blonde slid the door open and walked inside. Inside the shop was just the same as the outside, quite ordinary. The shelves were lined with most of the common goods, groceries, and whatnot. As the blonde walked around, he heard a soft voice speak up. Excuse me? Turning, the blonde soon caught sight of the speaker, a young girl who looked no older than 10 or so. She had long dark black hair tinted with purple that was parted down the middle, including a rather long pair of strands that went down the center of her face and parted around her nose, and framed her face while the rest was held up in a pair of pigtails held by pink ties. Her eyes were a deep purple in color and quite large, and her cheeks were slightly colored with a constant blush. She wore a white shirt with the Urahara logo on the front and a knee-length, pink skirt with white polka dots. "Can I help you with something?" she asked softly. Naruto smiled softly. The blonde had always had a soft spot for kids, mostly because they never glared at him like the adults. Before he could respond, a loud voice broke in. "What are you doing, idiot? You're supposed to show the customer any specials we have." The newest speaker was a young boy, about the girl's age though slightly younger. He had bright red hair that was kept short and seemed to flow back against his scalp. He had small, beady black eyes that had a slight slant and thin red eyebrows, all combined to give him a constantly angry look. He also wore a white short-sleeved shirt with the same design as the girl's and blue pants that went down 3/4 of the way before being turned up. He was carrying a broom over his shoulder. "I'm sorry, Jinta," apologized the girl, "but I just met him and was giving a greeting." "That's no excuse, Yururu," responded the boy, shoving the bristles of the broom into the girl's face. An action that both the now identified Yururu and Naruto didn't like. Naruto had always hated bullies, a side effect of being on the constant receiving end of bullying himself when he first started the academy, and he wasn't one to let it happen right in front of him. The blonde stormed over to the preoccupied redhead, raised his hand, and smack! "Ow!" bopped the small boy right on the head. "Ow! Ow wow! What the hell was that for, you runty bastard?" growled the enraged Jinta as he rubbed the lump that was now appearing on his head. "That was for picking on a girl, you little brat," responded the blonde, a tick mark already forming from the runty comment. "Didn't anyone ever teach you it's not right for boys to pick on girls? Naruto Uzumaki, ladies and gents, last of the true gentlemen." "Shut up. I'm the boss around here, and I can do whatever I want," roared the diminutive redhead, enraged at being scolded. "Oh really? I had no idea you had such a lofty position in this shop, Jinto. I suppose I'll have to adjust your next paycheck accordingly. Particularly if you keep slacking off on your own jobs to pick on Yururu," came a new voice, this one thick and stern. Suddenly appearing behind and overshadowing the young redhead was a new figure. He was tall, easily 6 feet 5 inches, maybe even 6 feet 6 inches, and very well muscled, though without appearing bulky. He had dark black hair worn in cornrows connected to a pair of long sideburns and a large handlebar mustache. He wore a pair of thick, box-rimmed glasses covering his eyes, had thick eyebrows, and his skin was lightly tanned. He was dressed in a white, sleeveless shirt, dark gray pants, and a blue and gold apron. At the sight of the imposing man, Jinta began to stutter, and quickly ran off. Turning his attention to the blonde, the man seemed to study him for a moment. Naruto got ready for the large man to either run him out of the store or try to overcharge him, the usual reaction to this kind of situation. He was quite surprised when the man spoke to him quite politely, even friendly. "Hello, young man. My name is Tezai Tsukabshi. Is there anything I can help you with today?" A little surprised by the friendly greeting, Naruto fumbled for a second before reaching into a pocket and pulling out the letter his mom had told him to give to Mr. Urahara. "I was supposed to give this letter to a Mr. Urahara," This is his store, right? Asked the blonde nervously. It is. May I see the letter? Responded Tezai. The blonde nodded and handed the large man the letter. The man softly took the letter and opened it for a brief moment to scan it. His eyebrows rose slightly as he finished reading before he studied Naruto for a moment. I see. Please wait here for a moment while I deliver this to Mr. Urahara. Yururu, please look after our guest for a moment. With that, the giant turned and walked back into the store. Naruto stood and waited for a moment before the young girl spoke up. Thank you for helping me earlier. No one's ever stood up for me like that before. She stated softly, her eyes never leaving her feet. Naruto gave the girl a warm grin before reaching down and patting her head affectionately. No problem. If the little baka gives you any trouble again, just let me know. The small conversation between the two was cut short as the door in the back of the shop opened again, revealing Tezai standing next to another man. He was tall, though nowhere near as large as Tezai, with messy, light blonde hair and gray eyes. He appeared to be in his early 40s. He was dressed in a set of dark green pants and a matching shirt, over which he wore a dark black coat with a white diamond pattern over the bottom half. He also wore a pair of traditional wooden geta and a bucket hat similar to the one his mom had worn, only his was patterned in strands of green and white instead of black and blue. In his offhand, the man carried a short cane while the other carried a small folding fan. The new man walked in and stared at Naruto for a moment with a calculative expression, before reaching out a hand and ruffling the blonde's spiky hair affectionately. So you must be little Naruto-chan. You've certainly got your mother's face, though you did inherit your grandfather's eyes, stated the man with a goofy grin. Thanks? Responded the blonde, not sure how to deal with the affectionate greeting. So you knew my Oka-san? He asked. Yes, I did, he said, smiling. Your mother was someone very dear to me, like family even, agreed the man with his grin growing. Now, if that letter means anything, I guess you're here for some new clothes? He asked. Yeah, but this place looks more like a general store than a clothing shop, answered the blonde as he looked around. It is, mostly, but I do some private jobs for friends and good customers, which both you and your mother qualify as, he said happily as he took the blonde by the wrist and led him into the back. Now I know you want the uniform your mother had detailed in the scrolls, but was there anything else you wanted? Well, I was hoping to get some other clothes too. Almost everything I have as well, he indicated his orange jumpsuit. Gaudy, ragged, orange, old, suicidally bright? Offered Urahara with a slight chuckle. Yeah, I've wanted something new for a while, but offered the blonde. Too many people can't see past your whiskered roommate? Finished Urahara. Yeah, agreed the blonde dejectedly. Well, you certainly don't have to worry about that here. Your mother was a very precious person to me, and it'll take more than an oversized, superpowered, fur coat to scare me away from her baby boy, stated the grinning Urahara, putting a comforting hand on the blonde's shoulder, before pushing him toward a room. Now come on, we've got measurements to take, and please remove your jacket. I won't be able to take any good measurements with that bulky thing on. Naruto nodded his head as he entered the room and began removing his orange jacket, leaving on his black short-sleeved undershirt. As the blonde did as instructed, he asked, How exactly did you know my Oka-san, Urahara-san? Please call me Kasuke. As for how I know your mother, well, Tezai and I are both refugees from Yuzu, and when we arrived in Konoha your mother and grandparents helped us out quite a bit, started Urahara as he gathered a measuring tape and other supplies. Really? I didn't think there were any other survivors from Yuzu around, especially after what Mom's letters said about the Civil War and then the Third Great War. Well, there's not too many of us, a few families at most, but we're still around. Me, Tezai, and another of our house guests are actually related to the Kurosaki clan, and the only other refugee I know really well who's related to either of your clans is Ryukin, a relative of the Ishida clan. If you ever want to learn more about the Ishida part of your heritage, I'd suggest you go see him. He works as one of the main directors over at the hospital. So that means we're related? Asked Naruto curiously. Yup, though probably pretty distantly, answered Urahara. Why do you say that? Because I'm actually a bit older than the Sandame, making me old enough to be your grandfather, answered Urahara with a smirk. Really? Questioned a shocked Naruto. But how? You forget about a part of the Kurosaki clan's Kekai Genkai, an extended lifespan. Even those without a Zanpakuto can live to be well into their hundreds, answered Kasuke plainly, before he took a look at the sword tucked into Naruto's belt. Speaking of which, your Zanpakuto is the spitting image of your mother's. Have you heard any of its names yet? He finished curiously. Just one, but I think I'm close to awakening another, answered the younger blonde with a small smile of pride, happy his sword resembled his mother's. Oh really, which one? Benihime, answered the blonde simply. You've heard from her already? Asked Kasuke a little surprised. Yeah, is there something wrong with that? Asked the blonde with a small frown. Benihime was supposed to be his mother's favorite, and he didn't like the idea of someone insulting it. Nope, just a bit surprising, answered Kasuke with a soft grin. Seeing the curious look the blonde was giving him, he elaborated. First, that blade was your mother's favorite. It was actually the sword, along with her hair, that earned her nicknames like Benicio, Crimson Tide, and Benishi, Crimson Death. Thought her favorite was the one she earned in the Academy Akai Chishio no Habanero, red hot-blooded habanero, for her hot red hair and even hotter temper. He added with a slight chuckle before he became more serious. That sword is also called the Royal Zanpakuto. Why's that? Asked Naruto. Because only a direct descendant of the clan's ruling family can awaken that sword. Back when Yuzu was in its prime, it was a requirement for the Kurosaki clan head to have Benihime as one of their Zanpakuto. Wicked, whispered the blonde with a slight grin. The two continued to talk while Kasuke took the needed measurements, which took about an hour to finish completely. Urahara said he'd have everything finished in a few hours and suggested the blonde do a little shopping around the store while he waited. Naruto nodded. Do you guys have ninja equipment here? I've needed to get some new equipment for a long time, but most of the stores. The blonde trailed off again. Afraid not. The licensing and stuff to sell normal ninja equipment is too much of a pain to get filled out, but I do know a nearby store that won't turn you away, stated Urahara with his usual grin as he tapped a finger to his chin. The man then called out, Tensai. The giant appeared in less than a second. You called, he stated calmly. Could you lead Naruto to the 10 points shop? When you get there, could you explain everything to Kataru for me? I'm sure he'll want to know his old friend's grandson is still alive and kicking, asked the elder blonde. Of course, sir, agreed the larger man before he turned to Naruto. If you'll follow me, Naruto-san. Naruto nodded as he put his jacket back on and followed the giant out of the store, making sure to wave goodbye to Yururu and saying he'd be back later. As the two walked, Naruto decided to ask a question. So who is this Kataru guy? Is he another friend of my mom's? Kataru-sen did indeed know your mother, but he was actually more of a friend of your grandfather, answered Tensai, before coming to a stop. Ah, here we are. Naruto looked at the building Tensai had stopped in front of. It was a plain storefront, painted a solid, dark red with a circular sign hanging over the doorway, which had 10 kunai each pointing outward to form a weird star design, and a second smaller sign connected to the bottom of it that read, 10-point weapons. The front was pretty solid and bereft of any decorations or advertisements, and the two large windows were made of dark, stained glass. Like the Urahara shop, Naruto wasn't very impressed, that is until he followed Tensai inside. As soon as the blonde entered, his jaw dropped. Surrounding him were rows upon rows of weapons, swords, kunai, shuriken, and anything else one could imagine lined the walls. There were also containers for other normal ninja supplies like exploding tags, soldier pills, and ninja wire, though they were overshadowed by the sheer number of weapons filling the shop. As Naruto continued to stare, Tensai released a small chuckle. Impressive, isn't it? He asked. When the blonde only nodded, Tensai continued, Kataru and his family are some of the best weaponsmiths in Konoha, if not the world, and they are very protective of who gets to wield them. That's why they disguise the storefront to look so lackluster, better to keep away those who just want an oversized trophy or mantelpiece, explained Tensai as he led the blonde to the back of the shop where a counter was. Standing behind the counter was a young lady who looked maybe a year or two older than Naruto. She was a bit shorter than Naruto, standing about 5 feet 3 inches or maybe 5 feet 4 inches, and was well built, with lean, strong muscles visible on her arms and legs. She had long, dark brown hair gathered into a pair of large buns on top of her head and light brown eyes. She was dressed in a sleeveless, pink Chinese shirt and dark green shinobi pants with a Konoha Hittite wrapped around her forehead, slightly covered by her bangs. The girl was currently reading a magazine until she heard the door open and the pair approach. Looking up, she instantly recognized the large man. Hello, Tensai-san, how are you? She greeted pleasantly, before she turned her attention to Naruto. He felt the girl give him an once-over before her eyes seemed to linger on the sword resting on his hip. Hello, Tenten-san? Could you get Kataru-san for me? There's something I need to speak with him about, asked Tensai politely. Sure, Gramps is in the back working on another project. Hold on and I'll go grab him, agreed the bun-haired girl, as she headed into the back of the shop. A few moments later she returned accompanied by a large, elderly man. The man looked to be in his late 60s, but despite his age he stood tall and straight, reaching at least 6 feet 3 inches with a straight back, and was covered in muscle. His hair was a light gray in color and surrounded a massive bald plate taking up the front of the man's head, leaving only his sides with bushy hair and a short beard covering most of the lower half of his face. His skin was deeply tanned by hours near a forge, and he had more than a few scars on his exposed arms. The man was dressed in a smith's apron over a white sleeveless shirt and dark gray pants. "Yo, Tessai," greeted the older man with a gravelly voice, before he noticed Naruto and asked, "What's with the gaki? Did you and Kasuke take in another stray?" he asked with a short chuckle. "Not exactly, Katsura-san," answered Tessai before he spoke to Tenten. "Tenten, Naruto here is in need of some new equipment. Would you mind helping him with his shopping while your grandfather and I talk?" Tenten looked at the larger man before shrugging. "I guess so." Before she walked over to Naruto and indicated for him to follow her. As the two walked, Tenten asked, "So what exactly are you looking for?" "A bit of everything, really. The owner of the store I usually shop at has been less than nice to me, so I haven't been able to restock on my equipment for a long time, and since I just graduated from the academy, I figured I needed to restock on all the essentials," answered the blonde. Tenten nodded her head and started to lead him around the shop, explaining some of the products as they walked. When they were just about finished, she asked him another question. "That's a really nice katana you have on you. Where'd you get it?" Naruto stopped for a minute. "How do I explain I materialized the sword out of my chakra?" he thought to himself before he answered. "It's part of my family's bloodline, it's my Zanpakuto," he answered shortly, which caused the girl to instantly stop. "Why, you have a Zanpakuto?" she asked hesitantly. Naruto nodded. "Which means you're from the Kurosaki clan?" questioned the girl again. Naruto nodded again. "But I thought the last member of that clan was Kushina Uzumaki?" "She was my mother," answered Naruto, before he responded. "How do you know about her and my clan?" he asked curiously. "My gramps told me about them. About how each member of the Kurosaki clan was a natural swordsman and the Ishida were natural archers. How the Kurosaki swords could change shape and gain amazing powers, and how the Ishida could manifest their bows and other weapons out of pure chakra with unique abilities," she stated with a bit of awe in her voice. "That sounds about right," agreed the blonde, blushing a little at all the attention. "Prove it," the girl suddenly demanded. "Excuse me?" asked the curious blonde. "Prove that you're really Kushina's son. I mean, if you are, you can either make a chakra bow or change your sword's shape." Seeing Naruto's skeptic look, she gave him her best puppy dog eyes. "Please, I really want to see it," she pleaded. Naruto blushed at the eyes. "Fine," he reluctantly agreed. "Which do you want to see first, the blade or the bow?" he asked. Tenten though for a minute before deciding. "Bow, I want to see the sword last." Naruto shrugged and held out his arm with the Quincy cross attached and channeled a little chakra into it. Instantly, the giant bow made of blue-white chakra came into existence, the handle clenched securely in his hand. Tenten breathed out a brief wail, as she studied the mass of chakra with wide eyes. "What's it called?" she asked quietly as she studied the bow. Naruto was about to answer that he didn't know until a brief voice seemed to echo in the back of his head. Deciding to trust the voice, he answered, "Kajijaku, Spiral Sparrow. It's not fully formed yet, I still need to do some more training to get it complete." "What do you mean complete?" "From what my grandfather's letter told me, the bow isn't fully formed until it takes a solid shape. To do that I need to do some intense training," answered the blonde as he let the bow fade. "When you do, can you show it to me?" asked the girl excitedly. Sure," agreed Naruto. "So how about the sword?" continued Tenten, her excitement still growing. Naruto nodded his head and drew out his sword. Holding it out in front of him, he proclaimed, "Sakabitasu Beneheim. Cry out, Crimson Princess." With that shout, his sword was again enveloped in a bright flare of crimson light before revealing the blade's new form. "Wow!" Tenten breathed as she studied the blade, her face inches away from it, and her eyes filled with stars. "It's beautiful. The steel of the blade is perfectly tempered and forged, the blade is sharpened to perfection, its body is slim but still expertly strong, the decorative bend to the hilt is perfectly placed to help ensure it doesn't interfere with the grip, and the U-guard is thick enough to prevent the hand from slipping onto the blade without interfering with the sword's movements." The girl continued to rant on and on as she studied the sword. "This girl is obsessed," was Naruto's slightly panicked thoughts as he watched Tenten. "Beneheim's a real beauty, alright," he finally agreed, trying to stop the girl's rant. "I can't wait to see what my other swords look like," he added as he sheathed the blade and it returned to its original form in a smaller flash. "Other swords?" questioned the confused Tenten, a little disappointed that Naruto had sheathed the sword already. Yeah, a part of the Kurosake bloodline is that each Zanpakuto can have multiple forms. I personally know mine has at least one other, and I'm working on unlocking it. According to my grandmother's letter, the most a sword can have is 9 forms. He explained, only to stop dead when he saw the girl was giving him another dosage of the puppy dog eyes technique, this time larger and stronger than before. Please, you have to promise to come back if you awaken any others and show them to me. Pretty please. The weapons enthusiast nearly begged. Sure, Tenten-san, I promise, he assured her. Yahoo! She cheered, before leading Naruto back to the front. Gramps, guess what? This guy's Kushina's son. She told her grandfather excitedly. So I've heard, nodded the older man, before he looked at the young blonde. You got your mom's and grandma's face, kid, not to mention your granddad's baby blues. Don't know where you got the hair from, though. Probably your old man. I wouldn't be so sure. The Kurosaki clan was very diverse when it came to physical appearance. I knew main branch Kurosakes with blonde, black, silver, orange, and even one with pink hair back before Yuza fell. Tezai interrupted. Katsuri just shrugged. Tezai said you were a good friend of my grandfather? Asked the blonde curiously as he laid his purchases on the counter. I sure was. Well, more like a business partner really, though we were friends too. He would make that special silver of his, and I'd shape it into anything he needed, or buy it off of him to make it into weapons. It's been years since I've got to handle some good Ishida silver. That stuff was magical to work with. The old smith smiled wistfully as his eyes got a distant look. A moment later a curious look entered his eyes. You wouldn't happen to know how to make it, would you, Squirt? My granddad left me the instructions to make it, but I haven't got a chance to learn to yet, answered the blonde. Well then, I'll make you the same deal I had with Yuryu. You promise to sell any excess silver you make to me for a fair price, and I'll make whatever tools you need at a good discount, offered the man, extending his hand. Deal, agreed the blonde, shaking his hand. Glad to hear it. Now let's ring all this up. Since we made our deal, you get a nice little discount off your purchase here as well. A few moments later the blonde and giant were heading back to the Urahara shop. He seemed like a nice person, though Tenten was a little bit obsessed with weapons, observed the blonde. Tezai gave a slight chuckle. I'm afraid it's a family trait. Kiteru is just as bad, only his obsession is with the materials he uses to forge weapons instead of the weapons themselves, he offered. Though I'd be careful around Tenten now, her obsession with your weapon might grow into something more. He finished with a slight smirk, barely visible beneath his giant mustache. Naruto blushed slightly at that. Tenten was pretty cute, and if she became interested in him like that, best not to think about it until the time comes. When the two returned to the Urahara shop, Tezai told Naruto that he should probably do any grocery shopping he needed to do while he went to check on Kisuke's progress. Naruto had agreed, and Yururo had eagerly helped him picking out the best merchandise at the lowest cost. When the blonde had admitted he didn't know how to cook too well, the girl had disappeared for a minute before reappearing carrying a book called 100 Simple, Tasty, and Filling Recipes, which she offered to loan to the blonde. Naruto had thanked her and promised to return it later. After about a half hour of shopping, the blonde was almost done when Tezai returned asking for him to come back to make sure everything fits. Naruto had agreed and handed his bag of purchases to the man to hold onto. A few minutes later Naruto was standing in the fitting room wearing what one could call a carbon copy of his mother's clothes. Loose black hakama pants with blue lines forming 4-sided crosses on his knees, his Zanpakuto sheathed in a dark blue obi wrapped around his waist, a tight, white tunic shirt with a blue 8-point cross on the chest, and a loose, black kimono jacket with the same blue cross designs on his elbows. Kisuke was smiling proudly. I have to admit, this outfit has always been my proudest work, a blend of Yuzu's greatest clans into a beautiful new whole, just like your mother. But something's missing, he finished rubbing his chin, before he snapped his fingers. Of course, I nearly forgot. He went to a small closet and pulled out a blue and black striped bucket hat, my personal touch, he added, plopping it on his head. So how do I look? Asked the blonde as he stared at himself in a mirror. Kisuke gave him a thumbs up. Very impressive, Naruto-san, agreed Tezai. Nice, squeaked Yurura shyly. Like a runty monkey dressed in fancy clothes, was Jinta's remark, before he got bopped by Kisuke. You are very much your mother's son, came a new, very deep voice. Naruto instantly scanned the room looking for the source of the new voice. To his surprise, the only other occupant besides himself and the Urahara shop crew was a black cat lounging in on a nearby window. Who said that? Questioned the blonde. I did, of course, responded the cat in the same deep voice. Naruto stared at the black cat for a moment, blinked a couple times, before turning to the Urahara crew and asking, "Did that cat just talk?" The others nodded, while Kasuke offered, "Naruto, meet Yorichi Shihoin, the final resident of the Urahara shop." Naruto blinked again. "A talking cat is your other roommate?" he asked before adding, "How can a cat be related to the Kurosaki clan?" The cat actually began to laugh at that. "I'm not a cat, my boy, I just like looking like one. I'd be happy to show you my true form, though it may be a little surprising." With that, the cat erupted into an explosion of white smoke. When the smoke started to clear, in the cat's space stood a beautiful young woman in her early 20s. She was lean and well-muscled with proportions that would make most men drool, and she stood a slightly petite 5 feet 2 inches. She had long purple hair kept up in a ponytail, sharp features, and yellow, cat-like eyes. What surprised the young blonde the most was the fact that she was butt naked. The blonde quickly collapsed in a massive nosebleed. The woman laughed heartily. "I love the faces people make when they see my real form. They always assume I'm a male because of the voice." She laughed. Her voice was now a husky purr, instead of a deep bass. "Actually, Yorichi-san, I believe it has more to do with your lack of clothing than your gender," pointed out Tezai. Naruto merely gurgled in agreement. A while later, Naruto had regained consciousness and Yorichi had put on some clothes. She was now dressed in a backless, black sleeveless undershirt, an orange overshirt with 2 white straps on each shoulder, a large beige sash around her waist, black stretch pants, long beige wrist warmers, secured by bands, and long beige leg warmers with brown light shoes. The group was now talking. "So you were also a friend of my mother, Yorichi-san?" he asked. "Yup, your mom was like a big sister to me. I was just a brat when we first came to Konoha and Kushina was in her teens. She always looked out for me while I was growing up," stated Yorichi with a warm smile. Naruto was about to point out that that would make Yorichi in her 30s at least when she looked barely more than 20, but he remembered what Urahara told him about their clan's Kekkai Genkai and let it go. Looking at the clock and noting it was getting late, the blonde decided to go home and call it a night. He needed to get his sleep tonight if he was going to start his training tomorrow. "It's about time I call it a night. I'm going to need to get up early to start training. So how much do I owe for the clothes and groceries, Kasuke-san?" he asked, indicating several boxes lying on the floor. Naruto was stunned when he saw what Kasuke could do in only a few hours. There were several copies of his new combat uniform, a couple formal kimonos and other formal attire, and some simple everyday clothing mixed in. Kasuke merely waved his hand. "No charge this time, Gaki," he stated, smiling. "I couldn't," the blonde started, not wanting to take advantage or charity. "Consider it 15 years' worth of backlogged birthday presents," explained the elder blonde. Naruto didn't know how to refute that argument, so he was forced to agree. Creating several kage bunshin to carry everything, the blonde bid his newfound friends at the Urahara shop goodbye, not without getting a promise from Urura that he'd come back soon. The blonde couldn't help but smile as he walked back home. He got some new clothes, new equipment, and most importantly, new people he could consider precious. After his visit to the Urahara shop and the 10 Points weapon shop, Naruto had returned home and started unpacking his things. Luckily, the blonde soon found that his shadow clones were pretty useful for menial labor. While his clones worked on putting away all of the blonde's new clothes and equipment into his chosen bedroom, the original blonde explored his new home. It was actually a lot bigger on the inside than he'd first though. The blonde thought that it could easily house 24 people in the place without it feeling the least bit cramped. Nearing the end of his exploration, the blonde found himself in the main library. The room was quite large, probably taking up a good quarter of the first floor, and filled with shelves of books. However, a few shelves caught his eye, the 2 directly to the right of the doorway. Both were marked by a large plaque on the top of the shelf. The first one was marked on top with a symbol similar to the one the blonde had seen marking the doors in his dream, a sword overshadowing an orange spiral, while the next had an image of a sparrow overshadowing a bow and arrow forming an X shape. Looking at the titles on each, the blonde figured that the 2 symbols were probably the clan symbols for the Kurosaki and Ishida clans respectively. The reason for this assumption was that each shelf was filled with books about the respective clans. Each held dozens of books detailing the history, abilities, and traditions of each clan. After looking at the 2 shelves, the blonde made a mental vow to read through both. Usually he hated reading, but this was his legacy, the legacy of his family, and he'd be damned if he wasn't going to learn every word of it by heart and memory. Remembering his grandfather's letter, the blonde found the appropriate book on the Ishida case and pressed the hidden panel behind it. After a moment, the bookshelf to the right of it began to slowly swing open, revealing a spiral staircase made of solid silver. Following the staircase downward, the blonde soon came to a stop in a large workshop. It was a large room, easily as large as the entire bottom floor of the house, and quite full. In it was a large furnace-like device, what appeared to be a large tub with hand grips on both ends, and several large machines that the blonde couldn't identify, along with a large variety of tools, equipment, and supplies. Sitting just in front of the entrance, on top of a small work table, was a notebook. The blonde guessed this was the notes that his grandfather had told him about. Picking up and quickly thumbing through the book, the blonde was quite surprised at how simple the process was for making both Ishida glass and Ishida silver. For the glass, it was pretty similar to normal glass making, mixing a proper amount of a mix of silicates and other materials into a batch before putting it into the furnace-like device to bake and melt. The only special parts of the entire process were the mixture of silicates and minerals, which was defined in clear terms in the notes, and the oven itself. The furnace was specially designed to run on a wielder's chakra, specifically an Ishida's unique chakra, in order to imbue both the flames and the glass with their unique properties. The batch mixture itself was supposedly formulated to improve the chakra absorption ratio for the glass. The end result were sheets of raw Ishida glass that could be taken to a glass cutter or other craftsman who could use it for production. As for the silver, the metal that the Ishida created wasn't silver at all, but rather an alloy created by mixing silver with several other metals. While normal silver ore was a key ingredient in the blend of metals and minerals that made up Ishida silver's composition, it was only required in small amounts, making it cheaper to produce than Naruto had earlier believed. The rest was a mixture of carbon, copper, tungsten, manganese, titanium, and several other metals and minerals, and a good quantity of iron ore. Its creation process required the specific mixture to be ground down into a powder before the powder was poured into sheets that were put into the same furnace as the glass, whose temperature could be easily controlled and changed depending on what it was being used for. The sheets would then be melted down into a liquid state before taken to a cooling tub where even more Ishida chakra would be channeled through the water. The final result would be a sheet of pure Ishida silver, which could then be taken to a smith for proper shaping. After looking through the notebook several times, the blonde placed it back on the work table before heading upstairs. Learning to make both the glass and silver was just another goal added to the ever-growing list of things the blonde needed to do. Oh well, at least I know that the next few months won't be boring, thought the blonde as he ascended the steps back to the main library before heading to bed. Tomorrow was his first day of training, and he knew he was going to need his rest. 1 week later. It had been over a week since Naruto had first awakened his bloodline. The blonde had taken to his training with his new abilities with a fervor that some would call possessed, spending nearly every waking hour he had either practicing the techniques in his family scrolls, reading through the family library, or practicing in his workshop. His efforts in the workshop were paying off quite nicely. Just 2 days ago, the blonde had crafted his first successful batch of Ikeda silver. He'd taken the finished product to Kitaru at the 10 Points shop to get his opinion on his work. The man had spent nearly an hour studying the sheet of silvery metal, running his hands over it, poking and prodding it with several different tools, and even channeling chakra through it to test its conductivity. At the end, the man had pronounced it as Grade A, Ishida silver, and Naruto a chip off his grandfather's block. When asked what the blonde wanted him to do with it, Naruto asked for it to be made into Jinto and seal Schneider, saying he'd need more with his training going on. While he was there, Tenten had offered her services as a sparring partner if he ever wanted to practice with his sword against a living opponent, which Naruto happily accepted. From what he read, 1 sheet could be used to create a dozen Jinto tubes or a third of a dozen seal Schneider. His time in the workshop was also where the blonde spent most of his reading time, since the process of making both the silver and the glass took several hours and only needed his occasional attention to charge the equipment and monitor the progress. It left a good deal of time to read, which Naruto used to study several of his clan's books. As for the rest of his training, the blonde was making steady progress. He was mostly focusing on training in Hakuda and Zanjutsu, trying to get the basics of both styles down, working to learn the basics of Kido and Hoho, learning to both manipulate and create both Jinto and seal Schneider after he got the finished products from Kitaru, and on mastering how to use Kajijaku, his bow, to its full capabilities. The blonde was making steady progress on all counts, and had even managed to cast his first Hado spell yesterday. Right now our blonde was lying in his bed, deciding to let himself sleep in a little today so he didn't burn himself out training. As Iruka-sensei had told him, being dedicated in your training is an important aspect of being a ninja, but going overboard will only hurt you in the long run. A good shinobi must balance work and relaxation to ensure a healthy lifestyle. The blonde had spent the entire week training from dawn to well past dusk, and he'd decided that he'd take today easy, probably just focusing on getting through a book or two in the library while he let his body recover. However, the blonde's peaceful sleep was broken when he felt a hand press against his shoulder and gently shake him. Acting on instinct, the blonde pushed outward, attempting to knock his attacker away while he rolled off of bed and grabbed his Zanpakuto, which he always kept sheathed right next to his bed. Opening his eyes, the blonde's hand quickly went to the hilt of his blade, while his eyes sought out his opponent. She wasn't that hard to find. Standing a few feet away on the opposite side of his bed was a young woman who looked to be in her late 20s, maybe early 30s. She wore a standard Jounin uniform, though it was slightly altered to include a couple of pieces of Anbu armor, and the sleeves were noticeably wider and longer than normal, a Konoha Hittite on her right bicep, and a katana sheathed across her back. She had a pretty face with sharp features and narrow green eyes. Her hair was a dark royal purple and worn long and loose so it fell down over her shoulders. Her hair made her look familiar, but Naruto couldn't place where until she spoke up. "Please calm down, Uzumaki-san, I mean you no harm," she stated calmly and quietly, raising her hands to show they were empty. The blonde quickly recognized the voice and connected the hair. "Nico-san?" he asked curiously as his hands slowly left the hilt of his blade. The woman smiled. "I'm happy you could recognize me without my mask, Naruto-san," she stated warmly. "Not that many purple-haired women in Konoha, particularly with that hairstyle, and your voice is still the same, Nico-san," stated the blonde absently as he stood up, his hands slowly leaving the hilt of his sword. "What are you doing here, and why are you dressed like that?" "I am here to deliver a message from the Hokage and escort you to him when you're ready. As for my change in attire, I've taken on a special assignment from the Hokage and am back to being a regular jounin for the duration," answered the purple-haired kunoichi. "What's the message?" "There will be a council meeting in approximately 2 hours' time, and Hokage-sama would like you to come to his office once you're prepared so you can discuss what will probably occur during the meeting." "All right," agreed the blonde. He hadn't fully forgiven the old man, but he trusted that he wouldn't lead him astray. "Give me a half hour to get a shower and put some clothes on." "I'll be waiting in the main sitting room when you're ready," agreed the purple-haired kunoichi as she turned and left. "Wait, Nico-san," called the blonde. The kunoichi stopped and turned slightly. "How did you get in here anyway? I thought the security seals kept anyone not on the main security seal from entering without being invited in." "I'm on the main security seal, since I was someone very close to your mother, one of the reasons I was asked to deliver this message. Oh, and please don't refer to me by my Anbu code name while I am not in uniform, you can just call me by my real name, Yugao Yuzuki," she finished with a small smile as she left the room to let the blonde get ready. A half hour later Naruto came down the steps, fully dressed in his new clothes and his Zanpakuto was sheathed in his obi. When he came to the main sitting room he found Yugao standing in front of the mantel staring at a picture near the right end. Looking around the boy said the picture was one of his mother standing behind a trio of younger shinobi. On his mother's left was a young girl who looked to be about Naruto's age, maybe a younger. She was dressed in dark black ninja pants, a light gray kimono top with unusually long and wide sleeves, and a black ninja vest with a Konoha Hittite worn on her right bicep and a ninjato sheathed against the small of her back. The girl had sharp features and purple hair, along with narrow green eyes. It didn't take long for the blonde to recognize the girl as a younger Yugao. Standing to his mother's right was a young man who looked to be about the same age as Yugao was in the picture. He was dressed in dark blue shinobi pants, a matching loose jacket over what appeared to be a black short-sleeved shirt, a katana sheathed across his back, and a Konoha Hittite worn as a headband. He had pale skin, short brown hair worn loose beneath his headband, and dark eyes. Finally standing in front of his mother, with her hands resting on his shoulders, was a young man Naruto guessed was at least half a decade younger than the other two. He was dressed in dark black shinobi pants, a dark black shirt with what appeared to be a red and white fan on one shoulder, and wore his Hittite easily across his forehead. He had intense dark gray eyes, black hair that framed his face, pale skin which seemed to hold a slight tan to it, and narrow features. The boy kind of reminded Naruto of Sasuke. "Your mother was my Jounin sensei when I first became a genin. This picture was taken just after Team Kushina was formed. At first the three of us didn't get along, but Kushina was an amazing teacher. She brought us all together, and helped us become the shinobi we are today," stated Yugao as a slight smile crossed her face. "Who are the other two?" asked the blonde curiously. "The man on the right is named Hate Gecko, he's currently a special jounin and my fiancé," stated Yugao with a warm smile before it disappeared when she started again. "The other boy is named Itachi Uchiha." "Uchiha? You mean he's related to Sasuke?" asked the blonde. "Itachi is Sasuke's older brother. He was probably the one of us closest to Kushina. I wouldn't be surprised if he was actually in love with her when we were still kids. Practically broke his heart when she told us she was pregnant, but she wanted him to see you as his own little brother. Her death had hurt him more than I think anyone really knew. After she died, Itachi became much more introverted, distancing himself from everyone around him. Gecko and I tried to be there for him, but his family pushed us away saying that it was a clan matter and that we shouldn't interfere. He committed a great crime and left the village several years ago. He's currently a high-profile missing nin." I'm sorry. Apologized the blonde, not meaning to bring up such painful memories. It's alright, stated Yugao softly before sighing and shaking her head. I just can't help but think what would have happened if Hokage-sama hadn't lied to everyone about your death alongside your mother. Maybe having you around to remind him of Sensei would have helped keep Itachi grounded. But there's no point dwelling on what ifs. We should probably get going. Hokage-sama wanted at least an hour with you to prep for the meeting. She finished as she started to walk away with Naruto quickly following her. The two walked at an even pace while heading toward the Hokage's tower, arriving there about half an hour later. While the two walked, Naruto asked Yugao about what his mother was like as a sensei. Yugao was more than happy to tell the blonde stories about what their team was like. How she was a hothead who, though that her talents and looks could get her through anything, how Gekko was cocky since he came from a long line of swordsmen, and how Itachi was an arrogant little punk who thought his title of genius made him superior. How his mom had wiped their delusions out by wiping the floor with all three of them without even revealing her shirkai. The blonde was quite surprised to find that his mother was the type of person who despised anyone who got too big for their gear, as Yugao had quoted her. Kushina's first lessons were always that pride came before a fall and that underestimating an opponent was the easiest way to get yourself killed. Lessons that she'd hammered, both literally and metaphorically, into their skulls. She even joked about how Fugaku, Itachi's and Sasuke's father, had once tried to intimidate Kushina into teaching Itachi, and the rest of the clan through extension, her Kido techniques. Kushina's only response was to break nearly every bone in his body with a kuda, before she promised that if he ever asked again she'd gladly demonstrate all of the ones she knew, using his corpse as a target dummy. Naruto had laughed his ass off on that one. Guess I know where I get my temper from, not to mention why I can't stand arrogant idiots, thought the blonde happily. When the two finally arrived, Yugao and Naruto were quickly buzzed in, and the third immediately looked up from his paperwork. Ah, Naruto, glad you're here. Thank you, Yugao, you can leave now, he greeted happily. Yugao gave the Hokage a quick bow before turning to Naruto. I'm sure we'll see each other again soon, Naruto-san. I hope so, Yugao-san. He agreed with a small grin as the purple-haired Kunoichi turned and left. After she was gone, the blonde turned his attention to the Sandaime. You wanted to see me, old man? Asked the blonde calmly. Hiruzen was a little disappointed that the blonde hadn't referred to him as Aji-san like he usually did. He'd hoped the week or so between their last meeting had helped the blonde understand and accept his reasons. Obviously it had not. The boy was by no means acting cold toward him, but the former warmth was also gone. Shaking his head, the Hokage stated, yes, now in a bit less than an hour there will be a council meeting. One of the first items on the meeting's agenda will be revealing your heritage and status as heir to your mother's clans. Before that happens, I thought it better to discuss a few things, particularly who on the council you should or should not trust. I'm listening, stated the blonde as he sat down. Well, first of all, I suppose I should explain something about your mother. She was the type of person who didn't mind stepping on other people's toes, especially when she believed she was doing the right thing. That made her quite a few friends, but a good number of enemies as well. Now several of the current clan heads are old friends of Kushina's. In fact, 2 of them were teammates of your mother when she was a genin, but there are several people you'll want to avoid. Several of the civilian council members have a grudge against Kushina, since she cost them a lot of money during her time as a jounin, where she destroyed several questionable operations linked to members of their families, in addition to their dislike of you for your condition. The elders, for the most part, are pretty neutral when it comes to you or your mother. They follow the letter of Konoha's law and only care about the village's best interests, though I will admit their tendencies tend to lean closer to aggressive behavior than I like. As long as you're an asset to Konoha, they'll support you. However, there is one man you must be certain to never trust, stated Hiruzen with every ounce of seriousness. Who? Questioned the blonde. A man named Danzo Shimura, the 3rd member of the Elder Council, stated the Hokage calmly, his voice taking an icy tone as he spoke the man's name. The man is a warhawk who believes the only way for Konoha to grow is through war and conquest. He tried frequently to recruit your mother into his private security force, called Root, and I highly doubt he will not at least attempt to acquire you as well. The man is extremely dangerous and cunning, and his beliefs run a heavy counter to my own. He'll try whatever it takes to get what he wants, and right now you'll probably be his main target, whether to gain control over you or eliminate if you prove a threat to him. If this guy's such a threat, why don't you just get rid of him? You're the Hokage, aren't you? Asked the blonde cautiously. From the way the old man talked, this guy was obviously someone that he at least disliked. I wish it was that simple, but Danzo is very good at covering his tracks and playing politics. He's been connected to several shady operations, but there's nothing I can prove. He's also well connected in the Fire Daimyo's court, having spent years gaining allies and connections there. Added to that, he has his claws deep in several sectors of Konoha's government and military. If I tried to oust him without due cause, it could provoke a civil war that could rip our village, or even the entire nation, apart," sighed an exasperated Hiruzen. "The man was also a friend of mine during our youth and my main rival for the seat of Hokage. If I attempt to remove him myself, many would take it as an attempt to secure my authority as Hokage over any competitor, something that could harm my own position and discredit me." "So it's politics?" stated the blonde annoyedly. When the old Hokage simply nodded his head, the blonde sighed. "I get it, I'll be careful around this Danzo guy," agreed the blonde. He may not believe everything the old man said, but if even half of it was true, then this Danzo guy sounded like someone to avoid. Soon a new question popped into his head. "You said my mom had enemies inside and out of the village. I'm guessing those civilians and this Danzo guy you were talking about are the key inside threats, but who's the outside?" "Well, there are several individuals who your mother caused a great deal of grief." Again, she didn't mind stepping on toes. "Several shady characters, running from mob bosses to corrupt politicians, would have liked nothing better than to see your mother dead, but they're probably not your main concern. Your main concern would be shinobi from the villages of Kumogakure and Kirigakure. Kiri and Yuzushio have, well, it's a little hard to describe, but there's a lot of bad blood between the two villages, particularly against the Kurosaki clan. As for Kumo, they made an attempt to kidnap your mother earlier in her life in order to gain control of her bloodlines. I don't know if they'll try the same thing against you, but it never hurts to be cautious. Those are probably the biggest threats you'll have to worry about from your mother's side." Naruto nodded his head a little before asking, "Is there anything else we need to discuss?" The two spent the rest of the hour going through minor details about the upcoming meeting. As the time came, Hiruzen had Naruto follow him to the council chamber. The chamber was a large room with an oval table sitting in the center. The Hokage's spot was at the end closest to the door, with the elder council surrounding him. On the opposite side sat the representatives and heads of certain Konoha divisions, including the representatives for the Umbu, torture and interrogation, medical, and barrier divisions, and the civilian representatives and clan heads sat to the left and right respectively. The council was now full, with the two of them being the last ones arriving. When they entered, most eyes turned to them and several widened when they saw Naruto walking by the Hokage's side. As Hiruzen took his seat, one of the civilian members spoke up, "Hokage-sama, what is that thing doing here?" "Naruto is here because he's vitally connected to certain events that have recently unfolded," stated Hiruzen while he glared at the civilian who just shouted, "And may I remind you, Councilman Higuri, that I will not tolerate insulting the boy in my presence." He finished with a slight flare of ki, causing the civilian to shrink back. "What are these events, Hokage-sama, and why is a full council needed to discuss them?" asked Hamura, one of the elders. "The reason for a full council meeting will be made apparent soon enough. Now, approximately 1 week ago, a Chunin instructor by the name of Mizuki deceived one of the failing graduates into stealing the Forbidden Scroll, stating that it was a secondary test that would allow him to graduate. However, his plan was foiled when a second instructor, one Irika Yumino, found the deceived student before him. What followed was a brief conflict between the two, during which Irika was badly injured. However, acting to save his sensei, the deceived student awakened a powerful Kekai Genkai that we've assumed was extinct, defeated the traitor, and was promoted to Genin based on his accomplishments that night. That student, as most of you have guessed, is none other than Naruto here." "And precisely what Kekai Genkai did young Naruto unlock?" asked a one-eyed man sitting in the back, the one the Hokage had identified as Danzo. The man was old, probably older than the Hokage, and his right eye was covered in bandages while his right arm seemed to be dead, resting emptily in a sling built in his robes. The man's one visible eye was now studying Naruto, a feeling that the blonde did not enjoy. "His mother's," stated the Hokage calmly. Scowling, the man known as Higuri decided to open his mouth again. "And are we supposed to know what whore gave birth to this YGH?" The man suddenly screamed as a chakra arrow flew by his head, less than an inch away from piercing it. Everyone's eyes quickly followed the path of the offending arrow to come to rest on Naruto, who had manifested his bow and was now holding a second arrow on the string. "Listen here, you oversized load of crap. I'm used to you idiots insulting me, but if you ever insult my mother again, my next arrow will go straight through your overstuffed head," growled the blonde menacingly. "Naruto, calm down," ordered the Hokage, not wanting to see this meeting turn into a bloodbath. Naruto gave the man a look, before slowly releasing the arrow and his bow and lowering his arms. The room was silent for several minutes as everyone digested what had just happened. "That was Kushina's bloodline," stated a slightly stunned Hayashi Hyuga. "That is correct. Naruto Uzumaki is in fact Naruto Kurosaki Kaida, only son of Kushina Kurosaki Ishida. Inheritor to the Kurosaki Zanpakuto, soul-cutting sword, bloodline, and the Ishida Quincy, monk of destruction, bloodline," stated the Hokage calmly. A moment of tense silence seemed to linger before the room exploded. Many demanded him be used as breeding stock to create an army of soldiers for Konoha's future. Others demanded marriage contracts to spread the bloodline, while others were demanding an explanation on why his heritage had been kept secret. Danzo himself was studying the blonde even more intently than before, the slightest shimmer of greed in his lone visible eye the only sign to what thoughts were going through his minds. That is enough. The booming shout of the Hokage combined with his unleashed ki brought an immediate silence to the room. There were reasons that this information was kept secret, reasons that I am not at liberty to discuss. Any marriage contracts will have to go through Naruto himself since, as the last known member of both clans and the only one aligned with Konoha, he is Uzumaki clan head. As for turning him into breeding stock, that goes against Konoha law and I will hear no more of it. Sarutobi is correct. Konoha law clearly states that no shinobi who is or wishes to become a member of Konoha's ninja forces can be forced into becoming breeding stock. Agreed Koharu. The law had originally been designed to attract bloodline clans when Konoha was first founded, making sure that they couldn't be forced to act as breeding stock. The boy's not a member of the Konoha military yet, Koharu, stated Danzo calmly, as if pointing out a flaw in the woman's thinking. He's still an academy student. Weren't you listening, Danzo? Naruto received an automatic graduation and appointment to the rank of genin when he prevented Mizuki from stealing the forbidden scroll and killing Irika Yumino. Responded the Hokage calmly. Then I demand he be removed from the military corps for assaulting me, shouted the civilian Naruto had previously launched his arrow at. I didn't assault you, team. I just shot an arrow in your direction as a warning. There's no law against warning someone of what will happen if they make a stupid mistake twice, stated the blonde with a smirk. A sudden outburst of loud, barking laughter filled the room as some Inuzuka laughed her ass off. That proves the Gaki's Kushina's. More than any sword or bow, only one of Kushina's pups would have the balls to say something like that. Howled the Inuzuka matriarch between laughs. You sound as if you knew my mother quite well, Inuzuka-sama? Asked the blonde. You bet your ass I did, pup. Barked out the older woman with a broad grin. Me, your mom, and Whitey over there, she flicked her thumb to indicate Hayashi Hyuga, were on the same genin squad. How many times have I asked you not to refer to me by that annoying nickname Sumsan? Stated the annoyed Hyuga head. Why? You never minded when Kushina-chan called you that. Responded the Inuzuka head with a snort before turning her head to Naruto. You know, if things had worked out differently when we were kids, well, let's just say you'd probably be sporting a set of Byakugan instead of those baby blues. She finished with a large grin. Enough of this useless prattle, exclaimed the Hyuga head, who was now sporting a blush that would rival his eldest daughter's. As much as I enjoy seeing Hyuga Dano getting humiliated, he's got a point, stated Inoichi Yamanaka, the Yamanaka clan head, with a smirk. Troublesome but correct. Since the boy is now the only known wielder of both bloodlines, he should probably be placed under the Ciare, stated Shikaku Nara, clan head of the Nara clan. Agreed. Nodded Choza Akimichi, head of the Akimichi clan. Ciare? Questioned the blonde. The Ciare, or Clan Restoration/Foundation Act, is an ancient bylaw carried in most villages. It is designed so that the last male carrier, or first male carrier in some cases, of a unique bloodline ability the right to form their own clan within the village. The law grants you several special privileges, the most well-known being the ability to practice polygamy, i.e. the taking of multiple wives. Explained Shibi Aburame, head of the Aburame clan. Naruto simply stared, wide-eyed and blinking at that statement. So shall we put it to a vote? All those in favor of Naruto being placed under the Ciare? Asked the Hokage as he raised his hand. Most of the civilians refused, not wanting to grant the demon brat any form of power. Most of the division representatives raised their hands in favor, since it would strengthen Konoha. It would definitely be in Konoha's best interest to see both bloodlines bloom in the village. Agreed Koharu as she raised her hand. Agreed, and the boy fits all the necessary requirements, stated Hamura as he raised his own hand. I must agree, acquiring more shinobi capable of using either bloodline would definitely be in our village's best interest. Agreed Danzo, raising his own hand while plots and ideas began to formulate within the aged warhawk's mind. Inoichi, Shikaku, and Choza raised their hands in tandem, though Choza had to help raise his lazy friends. It seems only logical, agreed Shibi Aburame as he raised his hand. The pups got my vote, agreed Sum as she raised her hand while her mind went to the marriage contract she and Kushina had made when her old friend first found out she was pregnant. The woman a feeling it was going to be a boy, and when Kushina had a feeling about something it was usually right, so the two had made a marriage contract so her son could marry Sum's oldest daughter. She wondered how Hana was going to take it. Hayashi silently raised his own hand while contemplating a similar contract he and Kushina had made for his own eldest daughter. However, Hayashi already knew how Hinata would react. He made a mental note to pick up a pair of earplugs before he told her. Then the motion carries. Naruto Kurosaki Ishida is hereby under the full rights of the CRA, intoned the Hokage, before he turned to Naruto. That's all for now, Naruto. If you would mind leaving and waiting in my office, I'll come by after the meeting's over to explain everything about the CRA to you, stated the Hokage. Naruto, still trying to get over the multiple wives part, just nodded his head dumbly before bowing and leaving the council room. A couple hours later. I need to marry multiple women, stated the blonde dumbly. Not necessarily, Naruto-kun, it's entirely your choice, but it is strongly encouraged that you do, replied the Hokage. He just finished explaining everything involving the CRA to the blonde, but the boy couldn't seem to get over that part. But Ji-san, I've never even been on a date, or had a girlfriend before. How the hell am I going to attract multiple girls? Asked the blonde, unconsciously reverting to his former title for the old man due to the stress of the moment. Naruto, you're only 15, no one expects you to be fully ready for this kind of thing. All you have to do is keep an open mind, and I'm sure you'll find at least a few girls who you come to care for and who will care for you in return, assured the old Hokage, while he mentally added that and your mother played matchmaker a bit before she died, but I think that's best saved for a later date and someone else to deliver. The blonde slumped back into his chair. The past few hours had been quite mentally exhausting. After the council meeting had ended an hour after the Hokage had dismissed him, the old man had returned to describe most of the key points of CRA. There were a lot of benefits to being under it, rights to easier and discounted land purchases when it came to creating and expanding his own clan compound, which the Uzumaki estate was currently the acting location, several tax and pay benefits to help bolster and build the clan's financial base, a possible seat on the clan council if his clan reaches sufficient size and accomplishes significant tasks to benefit Konoha. The later requirement his mother had already reached for his clan, and of course the all-important polygamy clause, to help boost his clan's size. It was all a bit overwhelming for the blonde. They'd also taken care of his shinobi registration, snapping the picture of him in his new uniform, and quickly getting the card made. A sudden cry of, "Time to die, old man," brought the blonde out of his revelry and distracted him from his mental breakdown. Looking up, the blonde found a young boy, probably about the same age as Yururu and Jinta, charging toward the old man with a practice kunai raised as if to strike. He was dressed in gray shorts, a yellow shirt, a ridiculously overlong scarf, and some weird kind of helmet that let a spike of his hair poke out. The boy was charging forward, bellowing a war cry when he slipped on the floor and fell face first onto the ground. Naruto, Sarutobi, and everyone else in the room simultaneously sweat dropped. "Ah, wow," moaned the boy as he stood up. "Who tripped me?" he asked, looking around until he spotted Naruto, who he then pointed an accusing finger at. "It was you, wasn't it? Admit it," the boy practically ordered. Now Naruto was getting annoyed. "The only thing that tripped you, Gaki, was your own 2 feet. Or maybe that scarf of yours," responded the blonde. "Take that back," shouted the kid as he swung his practice kunai at the blonde. Naruto easily dodged the clumsy swing, but had now completely lost his temper. Loud, arrogant brats were one thing, but this mini-punk just took a swing at him. That crossed the line. Instantly the blonde's hand shot out and grabbed the kid by front of his shirt and lifted him into the air before raising one hand to bop the boy good, only to be interrupted by more shouting. Honorable grandson, where are you?" The slightly panicked voice shouted from just outside the door. "Please don't tell me you're bothering your grandfather again. We still have a lot of train." The voice trailed off as the speaker opened the door to reveal what was going inside. The man behind the door looked to be in his mid to late 20s, and stood just short of 6 feet. He wore a standard Jounin's uniform, minus the flak jacket, a pair of perfectly circular, dark sunglasses, and wore his Konoha Hittite as a headband, covering the top of his head. The man's brown eyes visibly narrowed from behind his glasses when he saw Naruto. "You ruffian! Put the Hokage's honorable grandson down this instant," he ordered. "Great, another one of those," mentally growled the annoyed blonde before what the man just said struck him. "Hokage's honorable grandson? You mean this Gaki is?" He looked at the Hokage for confirmation, and the old man nodded his head. "I knew it. This guy's just like all the rest," thought the boy before spouting off. "That's right, I'm the grandson to the great Sandaime Hokage, still planning on beating me up?" asked the kid arrogantly. That was the last straw as far as Naruto was concerned. "I don't care if he's your grandmother," shouted the blonde as he slammed his fist into the boy's helmeted noggin, sending the brat crashing face first into the ground as the blonde let go of his shirt. said grandson's last conscious thought was, this guy's different. The older ninja's jaw literally dropped to the floor at that, while the Hokage merely rubbed his head, trying to stem his headache. Stepping forward, the blonde strolled out of the room while calling out behind him. See you later, old-timer, I'm heading home. If you need anything, I'll be there most of the day. The Hokage merely nodded and waved the boy off. Several minutes later, the Jounin finally seemed to regain his senses. The nerve of that Cretin. To lay a hand on the Hokage's honorable grandson. It was then the man noticed that said honorable grandson had also disappeared from the room. Honorable grandson! Shouted the now terrified man. If you're looking for young Konohamaru, Ebisu, he followed Naruto out the door a few minutes ago. Stated the Hokage while lighting his pipe. What? Shouted the now identified Ebisu. I must stop this before that hooligan corrupts the honorable grandson. Shouted the man as he ran out the door. The Hokage merely continued to puff on his pipe. Several minutes later, Naruto was once again losing his patience with the little gaki that had been following him since he left the Hokage's office. Finally deciding something had to be done, the blonde stated, You do know you're holding your cloak the wrong way, don't you, gaki? A section of a nearby fence, only with its divisions going sideways instead of down like the rest of the fence, peeled away to reveal the brat from before. You saw through my disguise, I guess you're even better than I thought. Stated the kid eagerly. Right. Monotoned the blonde, rubbing his forehead in irritation. Now he knew how the old man felt every time he had to deal with him when he was younger. Man, growing up sucks. So you got a name to go with the attitude, gaki? I'm Konohamaru Sarutobi, grandson to Hiruzen Sarutobi, and the next Hokage, stated the boy proudly, causing the blonde to raise an eyebrow at the mention of the kid becoming the next Hokage, and I want you to teach me. He finished with a large grin. Not happening. Deadpanned the blonde as he turned to leave, only for Konohamaru to grab onto the back of his kimono jacket. Come on, boss, don't say that. Please, begged the kid. Naruto sighed. You're not going to leave me alone until I teach you something, are you? Questioned the blonde. Konohamaru enthusiastically shook his head no while still wearing the same grin. I thought not. All right, gaki, follow me, stated the blonde, realizing there was no escape. That, and he liked the kid's guts and determination, reminded him a bit of himself at that age. Man, he really was starting to get old. Several minutes later, the two found themselves atop a forested hill in the center of the village park. The blonde had stopped by the 10 points shop and had 10 pick out an appropriately sized bakken for the kid and telling her to charge it to the Hokage's account, since it was his grandson who needed it. Drawing out his own sword, Naruto got into a basic stance with his sword held forward. All right, gaki, copy me, ordered the blonde. The younger boy quickly did as told, getting into a fair imitation of Naruto's stance. The blonde looked around and gave a few instructions to fix his stance, the knowledge ingrained into his own brain thanks to the Kurosaki bloodline. Okay, now watch. The blonde then stepped forward in a basic downward slash, then reversing the grip for an upward slash, and finishing with a diagonal slash to one side. Now I want you to do the exact same thing. The younger nodded and did as told, with the blonde shouting corrections when he saw a mistake. Nearly an hour later, the boy was able to go through the entire routine without a correction from the blonde. Naruto nodded his head. Not bad, Konohamaru, you learned pretty quickly. Now I want you to repeat that process just like that until I tell you to stop, he ordered, getting a shocked look from the kid. What? But why? Questioned the boy. There are a couple reasons. First, it's good exercise for your legs and arms. Second is for something called muscle memory. The basics of it are if you repeat something enough times, your body will start to remember how it's done, letting you do it faster and easier. Explained the blonde, quoting one of Irika's lectures near the end. Konohamaru grumbled under his breath, but did as instructed. 2 hours later, an exhausted Konohamaru collapsed onto the ground. The boy was panting and sweating heavily from the workout, and was about to complain until he felt something cold touch his head. Opening his eyes, he saw Naruto standing over him with a pair of drinks in hand. Sitting up and taking the offered drink, the young Sarutobi began guzzling it down. Careful, drink too fast and you'll make yourself sick, warned the blonde jokingly as he sat down beside the boy and opened his own drink. So why do you want to become Hokage, and why did you ask me to teach you? Asked the blonde curiously. Konohamaru looked at the ground for a minute before answering. My gramps named me after the village, so everyone should remember my name, but all anyone ever calls me is honorable grandson. It's like I don't even really exist, like I'm just a part of Gramps' shadow. I just want people to know me for me, not for who my granddad is. That's why I want to be Hokage, so everyone will see me for me, not who I'm related to. Finished the boy with a smile, like how you did back in his office. Don't you have other teachers? Like that guy who was looking for you. Ebisu-sensei? He's alright, I guess, but he keeps prattling on and on about lots of stupid stuff and how his training is the greatest shortcut to becoming Hokage, answered Konohamaru. Naruto snorted at that, as he stood up. There's no such thing as a shortcut to being Hokage. To be the Hokage, you have to be strong enough to protect the village and care for it as if it was your family. You have to face many challenges, overcome countless perils in order to prove yourself, and be willing to sacrifice your own life just to protect the village. You'll have to forge your own legend before you even stand a chance of becoming Hokage, and most importantly, the blonde's voice trailed off. What? What do I have to do? Questioned Konohamaru. You'll have to defeat me first. Since becoming Hokage is my dream as well. Finished the blonde with a smirk as he looked back at the stunned boy. Before either boy could continue, a new voice made itself known. So I've found you at last, honorable grandson. Turning, both boys caught sight of Ebisu standing on top of a nearby tree branch. As the man dropped down to the ground, his eyes instantly narrowed and grew cold as his gaze settled on Naruto. Those damn eyes again, thought the blonde as he let out a low growl from the back of his throat. Leave me alone already, shouted Konohamaru as he picked up his bakken and got into the basic stance Naruto had taught him. I've decided that I want to walk my own path to become the Hokage, not your stupid shortcuts. Your own path? Chuckled Ebisu. Surely you must be joking, honorable grandson? After all, what's the point of such a fruitless endeavor when I can provide a much simpler path? Mocked the special Jounin as he stepped forward. Shut up! Shouted Konohamaru as he charged forward and swung his sword downward in the first step of the routine. The arrogant Jounin easily stepped back and dodged the attack before stepping forward to stand over the boy's sword with a smirk on his face, only for said smirk to disappear as Konohamaru reversed his grip and brought his sword up right between the special Jounin's legs. Ouch! That had to hurt, thought the blonde. Ebisu's eyes widened significantly, becoming easily visible from behind his large shades. Sweat started to cover his face, until finally the man let out a very high-pitched squeak before falling backwards onto the ground, passed out from the pain. I did it. I actually won! Shouted Konohamaru with glee as he started to bounce around the hilltop. Naruto himself was smirking quite proudly. Back inside the Hokage's office, Sarutobi had watched the entire exchange with a warm grin on his face. Naruto, you've not only started down your own path to greatness, but it seems you've helped my grandson find his own path as well. Though I'd better be careful not to get in Ebisu's position anytime soon. He finished with a slight wince and a chuckle. 3 months later. Today's the big day, thought our blonde hero as he entered the Shinobi Academy. It had been about 3 months since the council meeting, and the blonde had spent the entire length of it training and practicing, with the odd day of rest being thrown in so he didn't burn himself out. He'd progressed farther than he'd originally thought possible over the time. From his Kurosaki training, he'd advanced pretty far in all the areas. He'd gotten quite good at Zanjutsu, thanks to his continuous sparring with Tenten, and had even managed to learn a few of the more basic techniques in the style. His training with Akuta was about the same, again thanks to having a good sparring partner like Tenten who was pretty good at taijutsu herself, though she often complained it was due to her psychotic sensei. He'd also been progressing nicely in his study of Hoho, learning how to use Shuinpa after about a month of practice, and was now fairly good at using it both in and out of combat, though it still drained him if he used it too quickly. His progress learning Kido was by far his most advanced training. He'd managed to learn the first dozen Bakuto, a few more than that from Heido, which he seemed to have a talent for, and had managed to learn the basics of Ido. He'd even managed to learn a few of the lower-ranked Raitan, lightning release, jutsu from the scroll, and had started the first level of training his lightning affinity. He'd also worked hard in studying the scrolls that his father had left him. The blonde could now make most of the basic seals, including storage and explosion seals, and was now working on trying to learn something a little more advanced. He'd also managed to learn a few of the lower-ranked futon, wind release, jutsu as well. His Ishida clan training hadn't gone so well at first. For some reason, the blonde had had some initial problems in his training with his various Quincy abilities. Deciding to take Urahara's advice, the blonde had set out to the hospital to find the Ryukin guy Kisuke had told him about. He needed to go sooner or later for his post-graduation physical, a requirement for all newly graduated shinobi, anyway. His trip hadn't started out that well though. Naruto had always had mixed feelings about the hospital, mostly because the place seemed to be evenly divided amongst those who hated him and those who treated him normally. He'd had the bad luck of meeting a nurse at the front desk who happened to be a member of the former, but that encounter had actually ended in Naruto's favor. Flashback no jutsu. Listen, lady, I keep telling you I'm here for my post-graduation physical. It's a requirement that I have one after I graduate. growled out the blonde as he stood in front of the front desk. He'd been trying to get to see a doctor for nearly a half hour, and was now a few seconds away from drawing his sword and turning the annoying nurse into sashimi. And like I keep telling you, your kind has no right entering this hospital, let alone becoming a shinobi, sneered the woman from behind her desk. She was confident that even if the brat complained, she could deny everything and that the council would support her. Naruto was about to lose his last bit of patience and draw his sword when a new voice popped in. Is there a problem here? Turning, the blonde found himself facing a tall man who looked to be the same age as Kasuke. He stood a bit taller than normal at about 5 feet 10 inches, had silver hair and dark brown eyes covered by a pair of box-rimmed glasses. He was dressed in a plain gray suit, a light blue shirt, and a gray tie marked with several dark blue crosses. The man seemed to radiate an aura of cool, professional calm, and his voice was as calm as a placid lake and slightly cold. Ryukin-sensei, stuttered the woman in shock. Naruto's eyes widened slightly at that. This guy was the relative of his Kasuke had told him about. Deciding to take matters into his own hands and see if this guy was like the others who hated him for what he held, the blonde decided to speak up. Yes, there's a problem, he stated angrily. I came here to have my post-graduation exam, and she, the blonde, hiked his thumb to indicate the nurse, is refusing to let me see a doctor. Ryukin stared at the blonde for a moment before turning his attention to the nurse, who was now glaring at the blonde. Is this true? He asked calmly. Well, yes, I mean there is, she sputtered under her superior's gaze. I see, he responded coolly. Have your locker cleared out by the end of the day. You are no longer an employee at this hospital, he stated coldly. What? You can't do that. This creature, her voice suddenly stopped as Ryukin's eyes locked onto hers. I could care less about your opinion on the boy, he stated icily, his already cool voice becoming glacial. When you entered the service of this hospital, you took a Hippocratic oath to treat all patients equally, regardless of age, race, status, or any other circumstances. You have broken that vow today, and I refuse to allow anyone who willingly does so remain employed in my hospital. The woman hadn't even tried to offer a rebuttal to the man's argument. She'd stood up, stated she'd speak to the council about this, and left in a major huff. Once she was gone, Ryukin turned his attention to Naruto. Now I believe that you said you need to have your physical? Questioned the silver-haired doctor. When Naruto nodded, he continued. Very well, if you'll follow me, I'll take care of the examination personally, he stated, and started walking with Naruto quickly following. Flashback no Jutsu, Ki. After that, Ryukin had given him his physical while Naruto broached him about him being a member of the Ishida clan, which he admitted to before calmly asking who told the blonde. When the blonde had mentioned Kasuke, the man had given a small, exasperated sigh and muttered of course under his breath before asking the blonde why he wanted to know. The two had spoken amiably during the examination, with Naruto mostly asking the man questions about his heritage as a member of the Ishida clan and his problems with the training, and Ryukin responding with clear, surgical precision, answering to the best of his ability with blunt honesty. Naruto found he liked the older man, though he was a bit of an emo. The blonde wondered if it was genetic in the Ishida family, seeing as how his grandmother's letter had described his grandfather as an emo as well. He certainly hoped it wasn't. The last thing he wanted was to turn into Sasuke. That thought brought him to consider his dark-haired classmate. Finding out that his mother had taught the boy's older brother certainly connected them, but the blonde could hardly stand the duck-haired asshole. It was really confusing. Eventually the blonde decided that it didn't matter. Sasuke was Sasuke and Itachi was Itachi. Just because the older of the two was close to his mother didn't mean he had to be close to Sasuke. After talking to Ryukin, Naruto's training with his Quincy abilities had improved by leaps and bounds. He'd completed the Sanrei glove training a little less than a month ago, and now Kagejaku was fully solidified. His practice using the Quincy Shijutsu, archery, had improved greatly, allowing the blonde to use a few special techniques with his chakra arrows. He'd also gotten pretty good using the Harenkyaku, and he could hold it for a little bit less than a half hour now. He'd mastered creating both Akita glass and silver, and now had a nice way of making extra cash by selling it to Kiteru. The older man was overjoyed whenever the blonde brought in sheets of silver to sell, saying that he already had several special orders for Akita silver weapons once he let it slip that he'd found a supply of the stuff. Kiteru also acted as a go-between for a local glass merchant who bought his Akita glass from him.